Um, the last conference and then this one, so many people intercept us outside after a lecture that with questions that we thought maybe it'd be a good idea to have an open question and answer workshop. So feel free to answer any questions you wish. Hopefully orient them towards Arizona. But no, anything you wish to ask, we can't guarantee we'll have an answer. One problem I have there is several years ago, somebody told me I should open my mind, and I opened it too far and all my brains fell out. So anyway, anybody, we'll throw it open to the floor. Any particular questions?
I have a question. As, you don't have to say, but what type of work are you doing now? Because you said you're very busy.
The question was, what type of work is Arizona doing at the moment?
Are you actually having a job?
Yeah, I'm a psychiatric nurse. I'm an RN. I am working full-time on a psychiatric unit. I work on a unit that has a contract with the county. We take patients that are people that come in there from the jail system, or they're off the streets. Sometimes they're just stuck in the system. They're on Social Security disability, or they're trying to get it. Usually, they're trying to get it because they're on getting Medi-Cal in California, and a lot of them are homeless or they're transient, and so these type of patients that I work with, we're an admitting unit, and we're a crisis stabilization unit. And the patients, the longest they stay on that unit, unless it's an unusual case, are for 19 days. They usually come in on 5150s, which are legal 72-hour holds, and then the hold is usually extended for 14 more days to a 5250. And they're stabilized on drugs, on a lot of neuroleptic medications. And the reason they get stable is because it kind of whacks your brain. Some of those drugs have fluoride in them, which is why they work. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
I was going to ask Arizona to explain to us, when you first left your family and before you ended up with Brian, could you tell us what happened to you in the interim period?
Yeah. I ended up moving 11 times. I was told when I was in the hospital, and I still emphasize that I went through the psychiatric system because I had nowhere else to go through. I had no support, nothing, nobody. I mean, literally nothing. So that's how I went, and it was a roof over my head for one part, just like I understand these guys that come into our unit when their money runs out because they need a roof over their heads. And that's how I was. And I moved 11 times. I always had room-in situations. They were unstable situations because I was living on about $700 a month. And my biggest worries were having a roof over my head, shelter, warmth, safety, and something to eat. On Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that's where I was. And what happened is I was being harassed and picked up a lot. I was impregnated 3 times in that time period, and it wasn't through sex. Yeah. Yeah, it was artificial insemination. I was put through electroshock. It was done to me to such an extent about 6 months before I met Brian that I was hospitalized with seizures. I was having seizures, and my therapist had an EEG biofeedback equipment set up, and she was recording and found that I was having seizures, and I simply was experiencing lapses in my memory, huge lapses. And then I lost my sense of balance completely, and I had to be hospitalized. I was beat up a few times, and I had filed police reports on that. I was black and blue for a year from bruises from what they did to me. I was threatened. I would have, all these needle marks appeared on my hands and my arms, and the ones that appeared on my hands were IV needle marks. Not from regular syringes, but I was given IVs. I was held and given IVs. And I have memories of a particular residence where I was, which was on a street called Tyrone, which is really cultically significant, and it was in a place called Sherman Oaks. And when I was there, there were a few times that there was somebody there who was going by the name of a Dr. Barrington. And Dr. Barrington I drew a picture of, and I was very minute in my detailing, and I described this to my therapist at the time. And I then, after I met Brian, we were in a used bookstore going through the books, and I found a book called Whims of Fortune by Guy de Rothschild. And I saw him on the cover, and I turned white and my jaw dropped. And even though this book came out in about 1982, here was the guy. And this man that had appeared, was at this house. I told, this guy was dressed very expensively. I couldn't figure out, I kept saying, I don't know how a psychiatrist can dress like this. This is a very expensive dress. And the accent was European. And I kept wanting to call the guy Guy, but I couldn't figure out why. So, and I kept thinking, is it Dr. Guy Barrington? Dr. Guy Barrington? But when I saw the book, it cleared up a lot for me because I've had involvement with them. And I just didn't know, I kept thinking, well, what's he doing there? I've seen him in Europe. Well, what's he doing here? But he took over from Mengele when Mengele died, and they tried to have him do some more programming on me, and it just wasn't working. So this was going on when I lived out there. And then there were military that were sometimes at this house too. And they were trying to do something else with me, and there was an argument one time when both parties were there. The military person that was there was saying, well, you're frying her brains, we need her, you can't do that. And this Guy de Rothschild turned around and snarled at him and said, we will do whatever we want with her, you get the leftovers. But there was all kinds of harassment there, and they made sure that I felt very paranoid and very afraid and very unsafe. And there was open harassment with naval intelligence, and it wasn't being done because I thought they were going to get me. But it wasn't being done because they were going to get me. It was being done to scare me, and it worked. So when I met Brian through someone at MUFON, because I started going to MUFON because I didn't know where else to go. I needed to hear that other people had gone through this. And that's the only place I knew where to start. So there was somebody there who introduced Brian to me. She was interested because what I was describing about being on military bases and being picked up and being through mind control. So we were meeting and talking, and that is how she set up for me to talk to Brian. And about that time, I had no roof over my head. I had been without a roof over my head for about 2 weeks at that point. So he tried to find a place for me to live and wasn't able to find anything in short notice, and so he took me in. And some small amount of harassment continued, and I am aware that there is still monitoring going on, and right now there is a party at my job who is monitoring me. And there is some harassment, but it's not anything that's enough to scare me off, or or keep me from doing what it is I do at work. So, this is what the last 11 years of my life has been like. I haven't seen my children. I should say I haven't seen my daughter since she was 6.5. She's going to be 14 in 2 months. I'm not allowed to talk to her. They both live about 10 miles from me. And I won't go over. I could go over and kind of watch her go to school. I know where she goes to school. And I could do stuff like that, but I'm afraid to do it because it would be a setup for me to do that. My son, the last time I spoke to my son was last May, and there was a reason, but I ended up having to tell him the reality of what my life's been and what I've been involved in, and I told him, this is the reality of your life, and this is where people have seen you here and there, because they'd come back and tell me, and it was very distressing to me. And this is what the family's about, this is what your father's about, this is what's happening to your sister, and you know this anyways. And he told me, Mom, if you really loved my sister, you would do anything in the world you could to see her. And I said, I will not, and excuse me, but I will not kiss anybody's ass. I won't do it. That is showing you the wrong thing, and I'm not going to show you the wrong thing. Why should I give in to that? This is doing you more damage than anything else. And then I asked him if he would help me to see her, and he said he wouldn't do it. So it kind of ended like that. And I would like to be able to do something about it, but I don't know at this point what I can do about it. I just live with it.
For how many years was Joseph Mengele your handler?
Okay, she said, how many years was Joseph Mengele my handler? Well, he was my programmer. Yeah. From about the age of 3 until he died, but I believe that I didn't see him an awful lot after about the age of 19. There was a lot of programming up to age 19, but then after that, there were certain rituals that he accompanied me or took me to, that he was with me. But he died, from what I know, he died in very late 1988, or he was very ill, and he died shortly after 89. So when that happened, the programming really started to break down.
Yes.
Do you believe that your son was programmed by, the Illuminati or whomever, and that he was trying to reach them instead of just being a regular son?
My son, oops,
Is it on?
I think it's on. Is it on? No.
No.
Until then, my son is, okay, okay, hello, no.
You don't have to answer that.
No, she's asking, do I believe my son is programmed, and is he basically with the Illuminati in that case? Yeah, my son is programmed, and I know for a fact that he's programmed, and I know that Joseph Mengele started in on him. So there is programming there, although not as much dependence on Mengele. It was switched to somebody else. So I don't know who it was switched to, but I do know Mengele, and I do know another party that was involved with the programming, and it was somebody that I know. So, and I don't know who my daughter's was, because I wasn't around her long enough to know who is behind that.
Who was Dr. Greenbaum?
She's asking who is Dr. Greenbaum. Dr. Greenbaum is Joseph Mengele. He went by Dr. Greenbaum. He also went by Dr. Green. He went by David. He went by Beautiful Joseph. He went by Fairchild, and he went by Dr. Allbusiness. He told me a lot, Dr. Allbusiness. Yeah.
But didn't your brother call you by that last name?
She's asking, didn't my brother call me by that last name? I had a brother-in-law. I don't have any brothers. And the brother-in-law used to tease me, and he used to call me Jennifer Greenbaum. And I was Jennifer Green. And he used to say Jennifer Greenbaum, and it used to really bother me. I used to flip out, and when that was happening, I didn't know why I was flipping out. But to my knowledge, Dr. Greenbaum is Joseph Mengele.
If I could interject just a little bit, Eve, before we take your question. It seems to be a standard practice with the Illuminati or the intelligence communities with their mind control victims, that if the victim begins to recover memories and breaks with the system, then they do whatever they can to keep that person in total poverty. And sadly, about 70% of all mind control victims are female. And invariably, so many of them have young children, and so the first thing they will do is to lose custody of their children. In fact, in Arizona's case, I saw 3 therapist reports which stated that her daughter was being sexually abused by her father, and yet the judge gave sole custody to the father. And then Arizona's been told several times since then that she can see the children if she returns to the Illuminati and continues doing the rituals. And now, a lady this afternoon at Arizona's lecture did ask, what can the public do to help? Well, one thing they could really do, if there are any philanthropic people that are very affluent around here, is to set up shelters for the female survivors and their children. That's badly needed, and there aren't any really. The only thing we do have is an organization called Mothers Against Sexual Abuse, and interestingly enough, several people who are survivors who have gone to the Mothers Against Sexual Abuse for assistance, they've also said the same story that Arizona did, that they were taken to the same house in Sherman Oaks to be electroshocked. And a lot of the electroshock treatment is through the soles of the feet, not just through the head. It's really torture. I think for one thing, people. The question is, thank you. Yeah, the question is why females? I think mainly because they can operate in many areas without anyone suspecting. For instance, planting bombs, being couriers, especially, for instance, people of college age. A lot of assassins are female for that reason. You really don't expect it when you see a woman. You don't expect suddenly that they're going to kill you. And one thing they seem to wear, and Arizona brought it to my attention, if they're assassins, quite often they'll wear shoes that will enable them to make a quick getaway. They won't be wearing heels at the time. I did see the photographs of Arizona after she'd been beaten up, and the backs of her legs were literally black, all the way, right from the buttocks right the way down to the knees. Somebody had worked her over with a baseball bat, as far as I could see. Eve, yes, you had a question? Dr. Reinhold. Yeah. Question is, have I heard of a person by the name of Dr. Weinhold in this country? No, I haven't. It's a programmer apparently, and I'm afraid I haven't heard of that one. Have you, Arizona?
No, I haven't heard of him, but that doesn't mean anything that I haven't heard of him.
It could be a different name.
Yes, that's true. Incidentally, I've heard a number of rumors that I'm Arizona's handler. Now, it's a valid question for anybody to raise. I have emphasized in my lectures, do your own research and really think for yourself. Now, in this case, the very first time I met or was asked to help Arizona, it was a situation there where I began a conversation with her to find out whether she was for real or not. And she mentioned an organization by the name of Janus. Well, Janus is a much higher level intelligence and assassination group than the National Security Agency, for instance. It's probably about the highest level of intelligence operation that is going in this country, or in Europe for that matter. And hardly anybody's ever heard of it. Well, it so happened I did about 20 years of research on the director of Janus. And so automatically that gave Arizona a lot of credibility with me. Obviously, if I was a handler, there was no way I would allow her to mention the director of Janus or even mention Janus to the public. And because Arizona's the very first person to ever publicly mention that organization. And Arizona used to work for it, so she knew very well who the director was. Yes.
I'm very, very curious about, I would like to ask Arizona about Sir Lawrence Delibero, or is that what his name is, or Pindar. Is he a being on a planet that will be here forever, or is he a European hierarchy, or what exactly is his role in all of this?
What is the question is, what is the role of the head of the Illuminati who has the code name Pindar and the real name is the Marquis de Libero? What is his role in all this, and is he a member of the European oligarchy or something else?
Okay, Pindar, this is somebody that is behind the scenes, and he's not out front, and you don't hear a lot of people say that name. The last reference that I heard on television, and it's the first time I think it's ever been heard on television, has been about a year ago when Hillary Clinton said she would run for the Senate. And she said that that she's speaking from Pindar's Corner, which is the name of Patrick Moynihan's farm in upstate New York. And it was all said to sound like, oh, it's just the name of a farm up in upstate New York, but there's a lot more to it than that. And then when she won the Senate race, she came up there and said something about it all started in Pindar's Corner, and now 3 black pantsuits later and something else, here I am, which was, again, letting people know, or, letting those that are supposed to know or in the know about whose blessing she had to be where she is. Pindar is the head figure in the Illuminati, but he is simply not public. And he's the, there always has to be a head of some organization, and he's the head. So does that answer?
Is he a reptilian?
Yes, he is.
Would he take another body? I mean, will he ever die, or has he been here forever?
Okay, she said, will he take another body? Will he ever die, or is he here forever? He is also a shape-shifting reptilian, but it's harder for him to hold his form because he's heavily reptilian. These guys live, from what I know, about 600 to 800 years, and when they're done with the human body, they're just going to take another. So that's what I know about him. I've only seen this guy at rituals. That's been my experience. Other than that, I have been where this castle is, and I've seen him there. Does that answer? Is that?
But I have another question.
There's another lady here in the turquoise.
Well, I was curious, you said today that you've got the method of microbial change. And are there many children at this point in time being under the control of these people that they can
There are more under that control because it's human population expands. Yeah, and there are just hundreds of thousands of children that disappear. They're not registered births. I worked with a nurse midwife back in the 80s, and we did home births. It was very easy if she wanted to take it out on somebody, and she was like that she didn't send the registration of the birth into the state. And so this created problems for the mother. One mother let it go, and she didn't take care of it, and it was time for the child to go to kindergarten. The school wouldn't accept the child because there's no birth certificate. So they don't exist. And so, I mean, I heard, there was a psychiatrist. Yeah.
How do they get other children to do this to other than circumstances? I was an LDNS for 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So how do you get other kids into the system? How did your parents get you in, and how did...
Okay, the question is, how did my parents get me into the system? How do other children get into it now? In my case, I'm bloodline, which means that there was involvement through generations on probably both sides, but it was very strong on my mother's side. So I was simply born into it, as she was born into it, as her mother was born into it, and her father, and so on and so on. And they will skip generations and not really do anything with the child, or they will program a family around a child. But there are other children they're simply going to use and then throw away that aren't bloodline. But they will use any children for any purpose.
Yes, ma'am. The question is, can we describe Pindar, and what accent does he have? And the language.
He's got it's like Germanic French accent. And I have parts that only understand French and parts that only understand German. And so I have been spoken to in those languages, and Brian's heard
Russian.
in Russian also. I mean, he's heard me, and so, speak in those languages, and I don't understand any of it. So I have a hard time with it. Just trying to interpret it, just trying to remember it long enough to figure out what it was. I have been able to get just edges of all of that stuff, but it would take a lot more of me being able to work very hard at it to get to all of it and exactly what is it that I'm saying. As far as what does Pindar look like in human form, I know him as a very tall man with white hair. White. Yeah, he's old. He's very old. He looks very old. And he has very, very, very dark blue eyes. Really dark. I wouldn't say that he's slender. He has broad shoulders. I don't know what you would call that. He's also, his skin is not white, it looks very dark. Was Pindar involved with Diana? In what way? No. No. This is somebody who is very you don't approach him. You don't talk to him. You behave yourself around him. He invokes a lot of fear. So, I mean, he's not somebody you just go up to and have a casual conversation with. And he has very few people around him or beings around him that he allows. He's creepy.
Yeah.
Do you know if Reagan Alzheimer's is really Alzheimer's or something with
I'm going to let Brian answer that. Say the question.
No,
Say the question.
yes, the question is the ailment that President Reagan currently the one he's suffering from, is it Alzheimer's or something else? And I really don't know, to tell you the truth. Obviously, right through his presidency, it was George Bush really running the show, calling the shots, running the show, not President Reagan. It could be just natural Alzheimer's, I think. Yes.
I have so many questions, it's hard to know where to start, but I think I'll start back with the origin of the reptilian people, and you were telling me the story about Mars being in our orbit, and you were talking about Venus.
Yes.
Could you clarify that for me?
Yeah, I acquired some very unique astrophysical data when I was doing research for an aerospace company back in the early 70s. And what appears to have happened with our solar system about 6,800 years ago, and part of this tends to corroborate what Velikovsky did. And give Velikovsky his due, he came up with his hypothesis of a celestial catastrophe when the NASA program had only just started, so there was very little data that had been released to the public. So great credit to him for what he did. He was virtually right on, I think. What appears to have happened is that about 6,800 years ago, Jupiter came lumbering into our solar system as an enormous comet. It couldn't have evolved with the rest of the solar system here because its angular velocity and density is all wrong. It just couldn't be there. And so when it came careering in, it disturbed the outer planets such as Pluto and Neptune. That's why they're off, their axis isn't vertical as it should be. They're knocked over to one side. And on its way in, it appears to have collided with another planet which disintegrated, and that's the asteroid belt we have now. What happened in that collision, it would appear that a huge comet was ejected from, during the collision and collected all the water from that planet and became ice-coated. And that, in the collision as well, it forced us into our present orbit. I believe before then, Earth was orbiting closer to the sun and only dark-skinned people could survive on the surface. And that Mars occupied the orbit we have now. And Mars, of course, then had an atmosphere, and this is where the Aryans lived, according to my theory anyway. And so what happened then, here we were in our new orbit, and we temporarily captured this comet, which we now know as Venus. And it did a couple of orbits of the Earth, created all new mountain building, and created a 10,000-foot tidal wave which swept over the continents and changed the face of the Earth, wiped out most of the inhabitants on the surface. And in so doing, when it approached near the Earth to a distance we call Roche's limit, that caused the ice coating to shatter and descend upon the Earth, and in the process it vaporized because of the intense, tremendous speed that Venus was orbiting at. And then it condensed again and it became ionized as it went through the Van Allen belt, and then was precipitated as snow and ice at the poles. And that's why the polar ice caps are thicker in the middle than at the edge, whereas most precipitation, if it's in the form of rain or snow, normally occurs around the coastal regions. And what happened, though, was, of course, we know that there were tremendous winds generated at the time, hundreds of miles an hour. And before this happened, it would appear that there was a canopy of water vapor surrounding the Earth, which gave it a very intense greenhouse effect. Water vapor is a much more powerful greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. And so at that time, there was a uniform vegetation all over the Earth, and it was quite tropical. And that's why we have mammoth elephants up, or the remains up near the North Pole today. When this ice came plummeting down through the atmosphere from Venus, that would have condensed that water canopy. And of course, in Genesis, it mentions that there's a canopy of water vapor around the Earth. And so that condensed, and so now we have the atmosphere we have today. We have the polar ice caps. During Admiral Byrd's expedition in 1952, the geophysical year expedition to Antarctica, he did some core drilling in the ice, and it revealed that the Antarctica was totally free from ice only 9,000 years ago. And since that time, a house has been discovered in the Black Sea, submerged, and its carbon dates to 7,000 years ago. So it does appear that around about 6,800 years ago is when the flood and the ice age were simultaneous events. In the process, of course, the mammoth elephants were flash frozen, and which is why they had vegetation in their mouths in Siberia. However, you can't get that code just from precipitation of ice. You've got to get down below 150 degrees, minus 150 degrees Fahrenheit to do that. And so I think there was tremendous electrical discharges between Venus when it was orbiting the Earth and us. And this created the same beam weapon effect that Nikola Tesla developed in the 1920s, which enables you to flash freeze an entire city several thousand miles away from the transmitter. It's the same mechanism. It's a little complex, so I don't want to go into that tonight. It deals with the quarter wavelength distance of the beam system. But everything basically fits in that theory. In the electrical discharge we'd have had between the two planets, or the comet, as Venus then was, and the Earth, would have created tremendous noises. And one of the earliest Chinese emperors was called Emperor Yahoo, because that was the type of the noise. And then the prototype Israelites, the Kenite tribe, their principal deity was called Yahoo, and that's where I think we get the name Yahweh and Jehovah from, is from that. Because it would have been such a horrific event, because Venus would have appeared at that time with a long trailing luminous tail and horns. This often happens with comets. They appear to have almost like a face and often have horns. Astronomers have noted this several times. So it's this horrible luminous snaking comet was passing very close overhead. It would have struck terror into the survivors of the flood. And this is where I think the legend of Quetzalcoatl came from in Central America, is the plume serpent, is the plumes. They do also, the comets have like little plumes coming out the head of them sometimes. And that, so this has left the archetypal image, and the same with Venus. It was such a terrifying event that a lot of Native American tribes until about 1920 would sacrifice a young girl whenever Venus was particularly bright, because they were fearful of the same event happening.
Are you saying that the plumes were native to the Earth?
No. The question there were the reptilians native to the Earth? No. Basically, as I mentioned, I believe that the Aryans were living on Mars, and then when they lost their atmosphere, or just before, they had begun colonizing the Earth. And strangely enough, I asked Arizona when I first met her. You know, Arizona's been groomed in a lot of the history of the Earth, and a lot of the history of the Earth as the Illuminati historians know it, and they're very, very accurate in their history, because you know, they have altars which have photographic memories, and Cisco Wheeler was one of their historians, and she lectured here at the conference last August. And she told me that she used to be taken down by her father into the Vatican archives and had to memorize things there, and had to memorize things in Tibetan monasteries, very old scrolls, etc. And oddly enough, I've heard her switch when she's talked to me on the phone, and Cisco knows very, very, just a smattering of Latin. And so when her mother altar comes through, who's the historian, she'll speak in fluent Latin. It's very interesting. And she's helped me a lot on some history, which then I can go back and check archaeologically to see if it's correct. Working with mind control survivors has been a great help to me in my research, in actual fact. But it's interesting that when I asked Arizona where the reptilians, or where the Aryans came from, without any hesitation, she said, "Oh, from Mars," and they were chased here by the reptilians, because the half-breeds have to have the Aryan blood to enable them to continue shape-shifting. Is that fine?
I don't know where they came from originally, but it was not in the solar system, it was not in this galaxy. And from what I know, they have simply gone, they have spent their time always going and pursuing that which has been their current I don't know how to explain this bonding. It's not a bonding, but it's like they have to have Aryan blood in this current time, if you want to call it time, that we're in. And they have come from another galaxy, and they simply have trashed all the planets that they've gone to. No, they're not as powerful as I've heard some people portray them as all powerful, and I don't. From what I've seen, they're not. They have a lot of power, and they seem to be in control right now. But I don't see them as being able to do that, because there are some phenomena of the universe they can't control either.
Yeah, perhaps I should mention that in 1971, very famous astronomer, British astronomer by the name of Sir Fred Hoyle, he was one of the foremost astronomers of the 20th century, he held a press conference in London, and he stated that according to his research, the human race was under the direction of a reptilian race that entered our universe a long, long time ago, and were in effect our overlords. So that will help you a little bit. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like Arizona to talk about the tiny colloquial school. What happened when I get
Okay, that she has said that she would like me to talk about my time in parochial school and what happened to me there. I was not in parochial school. I was raised very, very Catholic. Since my mother's background was Irish Catholic. And so I had to go to catechism every Saturday and one day of the week besides that. However, my parents were both public school teachers. And in my mother's school district, and we lived in that school district, it was a very small school district. There were 7 or 8 schools in the district total. And they weren't, I guess probably at the most they were 7 miles apart from the farthest to the farthest school. My father taught in another school district. And what happened in my mother's school district was that when I went to look for my school records, after all of this started and I wanted to find out, what I was looking for was I was hoping to see what kind of grades I had in school. What I found was they couldn't tell me because my records disappeared. And my name being the same last name as my sister, her records were there. And that she had been there. My records were missing. And what the school district did when I went and looked was they went and called my mother up because they couldn't find the records. And I was very angry because I said that's a violation to my right to privacy, because by that time my parents were estranged from me. They were not living in the state. They had moved because of what I had said. They were afraid that I would sue them. And when what the school superintendent did was call her, and she provided the information for them, and they told me that she had, and I told them, I could sue you for this. And then I tried to find the records. I did go to my father's school district, to school there, and I couldn't even remember when. That's how much memory problem I had. And my sister told me that I had gone there in first grade. I tried to get those records, and those were missing too. And what I believe happened is because I was going through so much programming and I was absent a lot from school, that they had to take the records. And also I did very poorly in school from about the age of 9 through 12. And I did poorly because of what they were doing to me at that point in time. I couldn't keep up this image anymore of, little school teacher's daughter who was supposed to do well in school. My sister shined in school. She had straight A's. And I did very poorly. And I was very stressed out, and my mother was driving me up the wall, too, because she was pushing me, and, well, we should do this, and we should do that, and you should be in Brownies, and you should be in Girl Scouts, and you need to study more, and you need to study your math, and math was a big trigger for me, and she held me back in 2 different grades, or, she tried to transfer me out of one class into another, and it was a mess. And I was also sent to see the doctor affiliated with the school in that time period, who was a programmer. And he did some things to me to get the programming for school back in place. So I have no memory pretty much of that time because of what he did. Okay, so the question is, you mentioned your bloodlines. What is it about your family bloodlines that they chose you for this? And was my sister chosen also? Okay, as far as I know, this is what I do know. My mother's family, on her side, on her father, they were the direct descendants, and I was always told this many years before, her sister had gone back to Ireland and researched the family genealogy. She made a very thorough search, and what she found was that the family, that they were the direct descendants of a marquis from the south of France. And they simply changed the name a little when he came to Ireland, and he came right before the French Revolution broke out in France. On the father's side, or her father's side, or excuse me, her mother's side, the last name wasn't Irish, and she kept telling me that her mother was Irish. And it didn't make sense to me because it was an English name. And what I later found out was that my grandmother's, my mother's father had been over in England and had been involved with Quaker Coronati Lodge. And somehow there's still the big gap of, well, gee, when was he in America, and how come I never heard about this one, and then where did he go, because I don't know where he went, because my information is that he didn't stay, yet here was the grandmother, who was born in 1888. On my dad's side, I was always told by Illuminati and by programmers and by all the people that I was around that my father wasn't my father because the bloodline was impure. Now, the mystery for me is, what did that mean? Because my grandfather, my dad's father, was illegitimate. Mother wasn't married when she became pregnant with him and had him. The last name was Reichenstein. The rumors for years and years before this ever came to the surface that I was, dealing with all this stuff, was that he was Austrian. And then it was that he's Jewish. No, he's Austrian. So I could, I have speculation as to what that's about, but I have no conclusions. But I can tell you, I don't look like anybody on my dad's side of the family. I don't look like him. I've got a photo with me with all the oldest granddaughters. There were 5 of us. And here are all these very dark-skinned, dark-eyed, brown-haired girls. And I'm there with very light blue eyes and blonde hair. I was very blonde up until about age 30. And there's no resemblance. And I've always looked at his family and thought, I don't resemble them at all. And then I was being told by my mother that I looked like my dad's mother, who was Finnish. And I don't look one bit like her, and I always thought that was odd that she would say that. Well, to my knowledge, I don't have any. My understanding is that they chose the bloodlines because of the Aryan, in the purest, if it's kept pure, then you've got the blonde hair, white skin, blue-eyed thing. But the genetics can be passed on to, other people that don't have the very fair complexion. But they tried to keep it very pure, and then it turned into this really racist-sounding thing. As far as I know, they're not superior to anybody else here. Now it's been made into that.
What is the meaning of the ritual? What is the meaning for the bloodshed? What is the meaning of the rituals so that you do not the ghost of what is the meaning of the ritual for the sacrifice?
Okay, the question is what is the purpose of the rituals? What is the meaning of the rituals, and why are they around certain dates, specifically the solar equinox? Okay, what I know, what I understand about the rituals are that the rituals are a method. They're a plan, a method to obtain something in the end. It's like a plan to obtain the goal. The goal being that consumption of human blood with, now I'm always forgetting what this is called, what the pineal gland puts out, what it's
pineal. Oh, you're thinking of adrenal.
Adrenochrome. Okay, when you terrorize a human being and subject them to trauma, and they're dying, only as they're dying, the pineal gland puts out adrenochrome, about 10 cc's of it, and it goes in the blood. And adrenochrome is the most highly prized drug on the market. It is stronger than opium, heroin, any synthetic drug that is made. It is feels very rapturous. I guess that's the best word for it. And the purpose of a lot of these rituals is to obtain that, and the way you obtain that is to torture and terrorize humans through a ritual, and thereby obtaining this in the end, and it is consumption of human blood. And since they have a history of, on top of that, going after blonde-haired, basically Aryan, white-skinned, blue-eyed people, although they will go after anybody, it just depends on the ritual. There is also the matter of obtaining certain hormones and melatonin through the blood. So this is the purpose of some of these rituals. In other rituals, there is the use of menstrual blood. And that is another type of ritual, and menstrual blood, or what is coming from the uterus at a woman's period, is very rich in nutrients and very rich in certain hormones. So they need to have these hormones also for them to be able to keep human form. They're lacking these hormones, and they need to have them. Does that answer? Okay, the comment and question is that she's under the understanding that when a woman menstruates, she puts out impurities in the blood. That is a myth of male-oriented culture. Okay, and that is also the purpose of that is also to keep anyone from realizing in the society and culture how valuable that menstrual blood is, and how life-giving it is.
I want to go back to Brian Stevens. Is there anything in print?
The question is there anything in print relevant to the timeline that we were mentioning? You have to piece it together, little bits from here and there, and that's why I like to take wherever possible information from Illuminati historians and then check it out with known archaeological data. That really helps tremendously. For instance, there was a Russian scientist that discovered that he investigated about 50,000 different forms of plant life, and found that they all originated at very high elevations in only 5 places in the world. In other words, I think when the global flood came, there were these 5 places which survived the flood effectively, and that restarted vegetation on Earth. And regarding that same situation, we've done quite a lot of work, Arizona and myself, on the location of Atlantis. And we were pleasantly surprised to find that the location of Atlantis, as given by the Illuminati historians, was corroborated by our good friend, our Japanese friend here, who asked the question just now, Arthur. He gave us some invaluable data on the Japanese history of where Atlantis was. And I like to give credit where credit is due, and Arthur's been a great help to us in verifying some of this data. And thank you, Arthur. Thank you. Yeah, the problem is with scientific dogma that's out there in academia. They have their own established timeline, and they're adamant. They believe in this concept of uniformitarianism, where nothing catastrophic has ever occurred on Earth to change the topography of mountains or anything. You only have to look around, and that's absolutely ludicrous. So what you really have to do is to take a good look at the geologic structure of the Earth, and you can see all the catastrophe that's occurred all over, and build up a timeline yourself. And so really in recorded history, we only go back about 5,500 years. There's nothing earlier than that, because the flood, I think, came and destroyed everything virtually 6,800 years ago. And so that's a problem in establishing decent chronology on anything. Well, as I say, the little bits and pieces are coming together now, like the discovery by Commander Ballard of the house submerged in the Black Sea. And Commander Ballard is a person that discovered the wreck of the Titanic, and I'm pleasantly surprised to find that one of my business associates is a very close friend of his, and my business associate, one of his hobbies is undersea exploration of submerged galleons, for instance, and so I'm trying to do some arm twisting now to see if we can get an underwater exploration of where we believe that Atlantis really is, and see what we can find there.
I understand that.
Yeah.
All scientists have I'm not disputing.
No.
I just need to see your knowledge of the
Yes. Yeah.
Just he does not do it.
No. No, don't take my word for anything, or the same with what Arizona said tonight. Do your own research, really, is the best way, really. There's so much garbage out there in print. Yeah. 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 I would say look at books on geology and anomalies that they can't explain. For instance, with the Ice Age, if it occurred just to normal climatological variations, how do they explain that there was no ice in the northern Yukon in the last ice age? And the reason being, I believe, is that as the ice or the snow came raining down from the ice coating, shattering on Venus, and then being deposited there near the magnetic poles more than on the North Pole and the South Pole, then at that time it flowed out like pancake batter. And so it would flow around mountains, etc., and that's why it missed the northern Yukon. And so it's little anomalies like that, and I think if you keep asking yourself why, and then pursue it, and little by little it'll all fall into place with the chronology. But I wish there was a book that had everything in there. I've written one, and hopefully now I can get it published pretty soon, and it might answer some of your stuff, because it's taken me 30 years to write the thing. Okay? Yes, okay. Yes, Jeffrey. Chapter 12, my book manuscript, the Templars, Saints or Sinners, It's a lot. There's so much to go through tonight on that one. I tell you what I'll do. I'll talk to you privately tomorrow a little bit on that one because there's so much. But yeah, the problem is that Hitler had a falling out with some of the Teutonic Knights. Many of them in World War II were under the direction of Admiral Canaris, who was head of military and intelligence for Germany. And Canaris and the Teutonic Knights became very disillusioned with Hitler. Now, in actual fact, you have to make a differentiation between Germans and Nazis. And why was the such a highly educated race as the Germans, why were they taken in by the Nazi Party and fooled? Well, if you look at the actual the German manifesto originally, or the Nazi manifesto that came out in the 30s, had a lot of good points, such as no child should be deprived of a good education if they were poor, if the parents were poor, etc. There's a lot of good things, except the Nazi hierarchy didn't adhere to their promises. And so that's how the German public were taken in by this. Well, what happened during the World War II, Admiral Canaris and his Teutonic Knights group within the military intelligence became very disillusioned with the Nazis. So it was Canaris really that, and his group, that tried to assassinate Hitler. And as a result, I think it was about 10,000 of the Teutonic Knights and their relatives were executed, because the Nazis had a policy there. If you stepped out of line, they would not only execute you, they would execute every member of your family, and 3 cousins removed, that type of thing. The ones who did escape, including Canaris, who then assumed another name, they became the founding members of the CIA when they came to this country. And that's the group that now call themselves Faction 2 and Faction 3. But really there was a lot of animosity there between the Teutonic Knights and Hitler. Will that answer for now, or? Knights Templar, most of the survivors went to Scotland and were given sanctuary by King Robert Bruce, and it's the offspring from that the Bruce bloodline that really created the Masonic lodges of today. In fact, most of the British oligarchy are all members of the Bruce bloodline, like Churchill, for instance, the House of Marlborough. That's a Bruce bloodline, and so they did survive. Oddly enough, the thing's never really mentioned in the history books is the reason why Saint Bernard of Clairvaux was the real brains behind the founding of the Templars. And he was there. He was the big money man of Europe at the time. Although he was in the church, he was brilliant at raising money. And he stated in one of his writings that the only reason he encouraged the Crusades was that the Templars was such a band of rapacious thugs that he wanted them out of Europe. So he shipped them off to Jerusalem, and that's how they got started. Okay, thank you. Oh. Yes. Yeah. Sinclair. Yeah. Oh, the question was, could you repeat this verbatim there, what you said, please? Yeah. Yes. Yes. The lady stated that she visited Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, and that was a Templar chapel created by the Sinclair family. And she stated while she was there, they were obviously making preparations for some type of sacrificial ceremony. And did I know anything about it? It would depend actually upon what time of the year was that. Was it like May the 1st? Oh, she said this occurred towards the end of May. Yeah, I was wondering whether it was a Beltane type sacrifice. Do you know, Arthur?
Was it around the full moon? Okay, that would be the real Beltane.
Yeah.
The real Beltane is, yeah, it's celebrated on May 1st, but it's also celebrated on the full moon. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, sir. Yeah, 3,600 years. So I don't buy that, quite frankly. My research is, most of it's totally at variance with Zechariah Sitchin's, and I won't go into the reasons now, but the problem is astrophysically, it's very hard for any planet to maintain a highly elliptical orbit, as he's claiming that one is. They tend to spiral into the sun, just as the comets do, eventually, for the same reason. Yeah. Normally, a planet has not a perfect circular orbit, but they are elliptical, but not this extreme elliptical orbit. Usually, that's highly irregular. Astrophysical data did indicate when we displaced Mars temporarily before it went into its present orbit, it did have a somewhat elliptical orbit. And every 50 to 55 years, it would pass between the moon and the Earth, which was catastrophic, caused horrendous earthquakes. And that's why we believe you have the Great Rift Valley that goes right down through, like Jericho and into Africa. It caused the Earth to bulge due to the gravitational forces and really split the Earth's crust. And apparently the last time was around about the 12th or 13th century BC, as far as we can determine. Then it went into the present orbit it has. It's stable. Arthur, you had a question? Yeah.
Getting back to the results.
Yes.
This for the research is for the reptilian dropout disease by doing this research stuff.
Yeah. What does the question is? What does a reptilian god benefit by having the ritual? Is that correct? Yes.
There were ritual that dealt with bringing down the ancient ones, the old ones, and these were other dimensional reptilians. I don't consider them demonic entities. They were real, and there was a way of bringing them into this dimension and really anchoring them here. And it had to involve consumption of human blood, spilling of blood. And so they might have been worshipped as gods, but in reality, they weren't gods. They were from another dimension. And they were... No, it was not against their will. It was something that they wanted done, but it was something where these had to be controlled. They were considered to have to be controlled by those here, because they were considered, I'm trying to think what's the right word, that they would kill you, that they needed to be controlled. But I believe in reality, what it was there is something about bringing in something like you might call it antimatter into this dimension, which is matter. So you have a very unstable energy that comes with that. And there were specific laws, I believe, that they had to go by in order to keep something volatile from happening. But these were life forms that were very alien to this dimension, and they're unpredictable. And then there was the process of bringing something down and keeping it here. And in order to keep it here, you have to give it something that is from here and give it something like human blood to stay here. Well, they can consume food like we do. I mean, you see them do it. Yeah, but no, they need human blood. You know, my curiosity is why, for example, do we all of a sudden have a shortage of blood, and they have blood drives for that? I think that's very interesting. You know, there's no out of nowhere. There's no more blood. The 33rd degree in Masons, that is the enlightenment into knowledge. And at 32 degrees, there's a lot you don't know and you might suspect. But at 33rd degree, there is something else happening, and you're going to be enlightened into the true knowledge of things. There is somebody that we know that was in Masonry, and he was invited to be a 33rd degree Mason, and he turned it down because he was told that he had to witness a human sacrifice for that enlightenment, and he felt that he couldn't live with himself. But that, I have a friend whose father was a 33rd degree Mason. Well, he's still alive. And I told her that he's Illuminati, and she didn't believe me. And I said, okay, go ask him. And ask him for the handshake. And she asked him for the handshake, and he said, that's not correct, it's like this. And then she asked him, are you 33rd degree Mason? He said, yes. She said, then does that mean that you're Illuminati? And he said, yeah, I'm Illuminati. So she was really floored. She really was very surprised.
Perhaps I should mention as well, not all 33rd degree Masons have participated in human sacrificial rituals. A few of them are kept in the dark, so that then if anybody writes a book claiming that 33rd degree Masons participate in human sacrificial practices, then these people will step forward and say, oh no, I'm a 33rd degree Mason, I've never seen anything like that. Same with the Council on Foreign Relations. There's about 4 or 5 who are kept totally in the dark the same way. And maybe I should mention that one of the reasons Arizona had to be genetically bred for her role is that as the former mother goddess, her principal role at a ritual was to be able to invoke these horrific entities from another dimension, another universe, and bring them into materialization, but then control them so they couldn't get out into the crowd or escape because they would do horrific damage. And then she had to have the ability to banish them afterwards. And I've seen her psychic powers. She has phenomenal powers. And that's why I had to mind my P's and Q's, or she'll beat the living daylights out of me. Yeah, there we go.
One thing I want to say about that the reason that when I was in that role is being called the Great Earth Mother, the reason for that addressment is that the womb is considered the cosmic door into which life comes from the cosmos, and that the symbol, the Vesica Pisces, for that reason is so important, because what a woman does when she conceives and bears a child and then gives birth is she's bringing life from another dimension. That is how it is seen. And the child is born through the Vesica Pisces. That's what the Vesica Pisces is a vagina. And this is why there's so much symbology also with the Masons, because their symbol is really a vagina. The dome? The little symbol they have, this
Square. Yes.
The Pantheon is probably, in Rome, is probably the perfect example with the all-seeing eye, the hole at the top.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also the arch that the Masons use, that is the symbolism for the vagina. Also, the goddess, the Egyptian goddess, I will spell it because I don't know if I could say it right. N-U-T. The goddess Nut. Okay. The reason that the goddess Nut was always painted on the lid of the sarcophagus of the pharaoh, and the pharaoh, the face or the head of the pharaoh was always between the legs of that figure that was painted on the inside of the sarcophagus. And the reason is because he's going back into the cosmic womb by way of death.
Adding to that, since we're on a sex trip now, by the looks of it, in World War II, in Britain, when so many towns were bombed, a lot of the medieval churches were destroyed. And what they found to their horror was inside the altar of each one, there was a phallus. And it was just that the hierarchy of the Church of England were obviously very, very much into ritual magic, really, I think, behind the scenes. Yes. Yes, you were. Yes. Yeah. It's an excellent question. Yeah, the question is, how do they control? What mind control techniques do they use to control the masses? There's several, and in particular, he was asking regarding control of your health. The health one. What's been happening since about 1970, approximately? The Russians or the Soviets established about 300 Tesla magnifying transmitters around the Soviet Union. And with a Tesla transmitter, you can send scalar waves thousands of miles, and you can target a specific city thousands of miles away. And the actual carrier wave, these are ELF, extra low frequency scalar waves. And you can send out, say, a 10 hertz, which are 10 cycles per second wave. And then over that, you can superimpose another frequency, and you rotate the signal to the right as it's traveling. And if you take any substance and dissolve it in a liquid and then put it into a polarimeter, then you'll be able to see whether the polarized light rotates to the right or the left. Anything that rotates polarized light to the right is very harmful to the body. That's why sugar rotates to the right. All herbal remedies rotate, if they're any good, they'll rotate polarized light to the left. And so by rotating that signal to the right, it was causing people to become very sick around Eugene in Oregon, which was one of the test cities in the early 70s. And almost the entire population became horribly ill. So that's one thing they can do. They have satellites which can emit a 12 hertz frequency, and if that passes over, if it's actuated, it'll cause mass seizures, for instance, epileptic seizures. And if you read a book by Zbigniew Brzezinski called Between Two Ages, what it really was a threat to the public that if we don't agree to the establishment of a one-world totalitarian government, this is what we're going to do to you. And he lists a whole series of threats, and one of them was the satellite that will emit the seizure frequency. And immediately after he published the book, Carter made him Secretary of State. So, nice person. And I'm sorry? No. No, there's a lot of misinformation out there about HAARP. HAARP uses radio waves, whereas the Tesla system uses a longitudinally pulsed etheric wave. Longitudinally pulsed etheric waves, a low frequency, you can actually orient them to any specific target. You can focus them. You can't do that with a radio wave. So therefore, well, what's the purpose of HAARP? Well, Nick Begich and the other few people who've written books on HAARP claiming it's terrible, they've assumed that the HAARP system is based on a patent by a person by the name of Eastlin. And in the patent it does state, yes, we can detect underground facilities, we can cause airplanes to drop out of the sky, we can cause earthquakes. You could do that if you had a Tesla transmitter, but you can't do it with HAARP. So therefore, what's the purpose of HAARP? For a start, if you're using radio waves at Gakona in Alaska, where the prototype HAARP is, it's too far south to entrain the radio wave onto the Earth's geomagnetic lines of force, which the Eastland patents call for. The reason it's at Gakona is circulating overhead and circling the Earth's magnetic field, the magnetic north, is a huge stream of electrons that, and electrons really are electricity when they flow. And this has about 400,000 amps of current. It's a prodigious amount of electricity. You know, we could do it with it in California right now. And so what will happen is if you send a high-frequency radio wave into this electrojet, it's called the auroral electrojet, then if you keep pulsing it, so every time that same point comes back around again, you send up another signal, you'll pull down a huge streamer of electricity, and you can harness it. And you'd need a huge mesh of copper, very thick copper wire or copper mesh to do that. Well, what do we have at Gakona over the top of the equipment but about 12 acres of copper mesh that's about 1 inch thick copper wire that it's made from, and that will handle that tremendous energy. And so 3 or 4 units the size of the one at Gakona, you'd supply just about all the electrical power for the whole of the United States. And significantly, before HAARP was ever built, the University of Alaska ran a pilot study to prove this technology works. Then Senator Ted Stevens of Alaska got a $10 million grant to start the HAARP project, get it off the ground. And I was told by a high-level intelligence operative about 20 years ago the final game plan would be to create this nuclear war in the Middle East, make all the oil fields in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates highly radioactive, so you couldn't pump any oil out of them. And in the meantime, they would set up the HAARP-type system in this country, so this country would have an abundance of energy. But this would bring down countries such as Japan and create havoc right through the Asian countries. So that's basically what HAARP's all about.
What about the chemtrails? Do you have any explanation?
One claim is that they're spraying aluminum oxide in order to create raise the temperature of the Earth. And that could well be. The reason given is that the reptilians, when they come out in the open, they have to have a hot, humid climate. And as Arizona's told me, that the real full-blooded reptilians usually live underground. because they want a warm environment. So that makes sense. Certainly, it's pointless trying to spray any type of pesticide or harm or toxic substance at the elevation of a chemtrail. It's ridiculous because it would take hundreds of miles for it to travel before it hit the ground. And the other thing is that jet planes used to use JP4 fuel. Then a few years ago they switched to JP8 fuel, which has ethylene dibromide in it because it makes it less flammable if you had a crash. And but the ethylene dibromide seems to act as a cloud seeding agent, and that's why if a plane is climbing and it goes through a layer of humid air, then you'll get that cloud seeding effect, and the contrail just spreads out a long way and remains there for hours. But if you look at a plane flying through very arid air, you get virtually no contrail, or it disappears in 5 seconds.
So nothing really to fear.
Well, the only thing is, from a greenhouse effect, and I think they are trying to do that to some degree. But I think most of the contrails that spread out, that's just due to a plane with using the regular JP8 fuel going through a humid area, and then you find if it climbs higher, the contrail stops. So I think that's it. Yes, Dick.
What's the true story of these crop circles?
Oh yeah, that really bugs me. Incidentally, there is a book coming out in I think about 3 or 4 months on crop circles, and my own theory, apparently I found out a few weeks ago, is in the book. I've been mentioned in there, so nail me to the wall probably. There is a beam weapon technology known as Mossbar technology. What a Mossbar beam weapon consists of primarily is radioactive substance such as plutonium mixed with a light atomic number element such as aluminum or magnesium. And then when you activate it at a certain acoustic frequency, you'll get an intense stream of gamma radiation coming out, and that's your beam weapon. You can use the same thing or it's being used now for covert and radio communication, because you can't jam the signal, and it's not it can't be affected by any static electricity. What you can do with a beam weapon, well, first of all, let's look at the characteristics of a typical crop circle. The stalk of the grain is bent over, usually at the uppermost growth node, those little bumps on the stalk. They have a very high moisture content, and a newly formed genuine crop circle, for a day or two afterwards, you'll hear a slight residual clicking sound in the ground. And then they also have a very high emission of alpha radiation, which is why you shouldn't go in them. And that lasts for quite a few days, and then you get some beta radiation in there as well. And isotopes of yttrium, which is a radioactive isotope. Any animal found or caught in the crop circles that's being formed is turned into a block of carbon. So those are your basic characteristics, and they are the characteristics you would get if you create a crop circle with a Mossbar beam weapon from one of our own terrestrially built flying saucers, or from a helicopter, or from one of our satellites. And we have a lot of satellites up there now with Mossbar beam weaponry in, because that's why the US entered into a nuclear test ban with the Russians several years ago, after we had our Mossbar system completed around about 1970 and installed in our satellites. Because with one of those up there, you can turn the inhabitants of an entire city into carbon, and the buildings remain, and no radiation. So we never had any complex crop circles until after the early 1970s. And with a Mossbar system, you could make a crop circle probably in about 5 seconds, no problem. Very sophisticated. Get it right down to one blade of grain. In fact, you can do very fine detail. Oh, incidentally, if you look outside most crop circles, you'll find 1, 2, or 3 circular swirl marks about 12 inches in diameter, and that would appear to be where they focus the beam and set the energy level so it's not too high, and they incinerate the whole thing before they start making the crop circle. But I'm horrified to hear of people actually camping out overnight in the middle of a crop circle is a good way to get cancer. So now why the very complex patterns with sacred geometry? Well, every object has an energy field, and so everything has an energy field of a specific shape. And so I think by creating the crop circles, you're going to influence the countryside around there for good or bad, and also influence the people living in that vicinity. And interestingly enough, although we've had crop circles show up all over the world, majority of them, I'd say probably about 70 or 80% of them, have been within about 20 miles radius of Stonehenge. Well, why should that be? Well, about 20 miles away, you've got Boscombe Down, which is the Area 51 of Britain, and immediately after World War II, British intelligence discovered a huge underground facility in the Harz Mountains in Bavaria, where they developed and built most of the German flying saucers, because by the end of World War II, Germans were flying craft up to 250 feet in diameter and very, very fast. And so there was a declassified British intelligence report. They declassified it in 1956, which admitted that the British intelligence had taken 6 freight train loads of flying saucer hardware and documentation out of that facility, took it back to Boscombe Down. And so I think what we have are flying saucers in the underground facility there doing most of the crop circles. And of course, one thing you see the government doesn't want us to believe is that we have very, very efficient, very fast flying saucers, and we've had them for 100 years or so. And so they're trying to create the impression that these circles are so technologically advanced, they have to be done by ETs. And yeah, but. Oh, sure. Yeah, from other realms. Yeah, from the question was, or the statement was, that flying saucers have been around throughout history, and I fully concur. But not the super sophisticated ones. They're usually swirl type, which I think were created by geopathic stress. I used to live only a few miles from Stonehenge in my late teens, and we used to get the swirls all the time in the corn, and I think that, or the grain, and I think that was just the geopathic stress etheric vortexes creating it. And I've researched crop circles back to the 17th century, but I've yet to come across any data back there of super sophisticated geometric forms. Now, I'd be happy to hear from somebody and prove me wrong on that, but I've yet to see any evidence of it.
What
yes, sir.
is the importance for having satanic rituals on an equinox day or summer solstice, or those special days? Well, there's some sun rising and moon rising, and people pray, and also Sirius rising and Orion rising, time from the horizon. They also have a special energy people feel. And my question is, those satanic rituals, why they have a special days for equinox and the solstice days?
Equinoxes, for information, equinoxes represent the turning of winter to spring and summer to fall. And solstices are representative of fall to winter and spring to summer. And there are, for one thing, it's concerned with the solar deity, the sun god, and the whole year represents, the birth, the life, and the death of the sun deity. Okay, so the spring, or actually the winter solstice represents the death of the old king, the birth of the new king. And then in the summer, it's the height of it's reaching manhood. So it's simply the path, year-round path. And that's what that is about. It's all about the solar deity.
If I could add a brief comment to that, and then we'll take a 10-minute intermission and get some fresh air, and then we'll be off again. There's a type of entity that pervades our Earth realm. It's an astral entity which Carl Jung called a psychoidal energy. And these are highly evolved beings that they can only materialize and drop the frequency down to a level where they can, become visible at certain times when the either the geomagnetic stress in the area where you are is just right, or more importantly, when the Earth's magnetic field is very, very calm. And it's calmest actually at night. That's why most psychic manifestations seem to occur of that nature at nighttime. When they do manifest, they'll manifest in a form that is socially or culturally acceptable to your subconscious mind. So for a peasant, they'll tend to appear as a pixie or a fairy or something like that. To a Catholic, as the Madonna or an angel. And to a UFO buff, they're going to appear as a gray or something like that. I'm not saying there aren't any genuine gray aliens out there, but these entities have that ability to adopt any shape they wish when they appear. Now, preferably, they like to appear when the Earth's magnetic field is very, very calm. And it's calmest for the 8 minutes or so of a total lunar or solar eclipse. And that's why Native American shamans would stand in the middle of their medicine wheels, which are invariably built over an etheric vortex in any case. They would stand there, and during those 8 minutes when the magnetic field was very quiescent, then they could actually bring in these highly evolved entities, and they would materialize and give them, spiritual information. And this is an area which has been almost totally overlooked by UFO writers, a very important one. They love to manifest as well through silica. So in other words, if you're in a room and you have a mirror, they'll tend to materialize through the mirror rather than the wall, if they have a chance. A few of them appear to be malevolent, or give you false information or things like that. I think in most cases what they're really doing is saying we have the ability to attune with the cosmos, and we should learn for ourselves and research for ourselves instead of relying on higher entities to do it for us. I think that's part of it, the reason why they sometimes appear very, very mischievous. There are other entities out there that can manifest, and especially reptilians. And these are not the reptilians on Earth. There seem to be another group of them, and they're very nasty. And I know of one case in particular where husband and wife were in bed, and two of these reptilians materialized and raped this lady. And
Has anybody tried to shoot a reptilian?
Chupacabras, yeah. And sorry. Oh, the question was, has anybody tried to shoot to kill the reptilians? I don't know. I do know there was an incident in Puerto Rico where a few people saw a chupacabra, and a police officer did wound it. And they found the albumin count of the albumin ratio to hemoglobin ratio of the blood was different from any known creature. That's the only time I've encountered them when I used to do a lot of exorcism work in the 1970s, and I've had encounters with a number of reptilians of that nature and tussles, but they're not very nice. But again, let's think of it with the reptilians who are running the Earth at the moment. They were here, I believe, before the human race. And so they're from another dimension. I don't think they can feel love. This is one of the big problems in dealing with them. And so I feel sorry for them in a way. They're trapped in that kind of environment. I think we're luckier than they are. We know how to give love, and love is a very powerful force. I tell you what, why don't we take a 10-minute intermission now, and then we'll take your question next, okay? Thank you. Okay.
And Arizona Wilder shared yesterday the symptoms of child abuse in children, and I thought it was very good, and I think it'd be good to have it on video.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. Yeah, the question was, did I know anything about the John F. Kennedy Jr. assassination. And I do know what some of the FBI report, which is kept pretty classified, states. And that is that there was a bomb placed in a package in the luggage, in the luggage compartment of the plane, which is at the rear of the plane, and it blew the whole rear of the plane off, and just crashed. When it was on its approach, actual fact, to the airport that it was heading for. One of the suitcases, in fact, ended up great distance away from the rest of the wreckage, which again is indicative that it was a bomb that blew it up. Plus, of course, some people actually saw the flash as it exploded in the plane. The reason for it, and incidentally, there was a fourth person on that plane. He was observed, getting on board of the plane at the airport, and before it took off, and then also the FBI report also mentions 4 people. Who was the fourth person? That's an unknown. I think the motive for it was that several months before the assassination or the accident or whatever, Kennedy was given a copy of The Biggest Secret, David Icke's book. And that encouraged him to decide to run for the presidency. And a member of Al Gore's team approached him and asked him, would he consider being Al Gore's running mate? And apparently he said no. He said on August the 1st he would announce his candidacy for the presidential race. And so that was that story as I know it. So I don't know any more than that, but.
So Hillary didn't have anything to do with it?
Ask, do you believe that the Greys are here? One of the reasons is to learn how to love that we love and they cannot, and that was going to be my question.
Yes. The question is, do we think that the Greys are here so they can learn to love? Would you care to answer that one? I'm not going to talk. Well, she's been around them a lot anyway, so.
But in a way, I'm going to throw it back to you. Also, because, I saw most of what I saw on the base at Area 51 were the manufactured ones, and they look a little bit different than the real ones. It's not robotic. It's they're manufactured. They were made out of DNA from dolphins and human beings and some other species of alien also, but they look a little bit different than the other Greys. But these are very controllable. The ones that I saw the majority of the time. As far as about the aliens learning something, you are what you are. You just are what you are. But the way I was going to throw it back to Brian was I was going to, he told me recently, he told me more than one time, but it just never hit me until the last time he said anything. He's one of the few people that's seen the Roswell autopsy report.
Yeah, I did see the report. It's a classified report, and I saw it about 25 years ago. And there were 2 of them actually alive, but one of them was in a coma and they didn't realize it, and they started the autopsy and went too far and killed it. But we're very privileged, Arizona and myself, to be a friend of Credo Mutwa, the Sanusi, or head shaman and official historian of the Zulu Nation. He's a very erudite person and a world traveler. And he's seen dead gray aliens, and he said they have a tremendous number of crashes of saucers, alien saucers in Africa over the years. And he said the ones he's seen, you have to cut. If you cut them open, and it takes an axe to do it. They're very tough skin, but inside there's a small reptilian. So, you know, I don't know any more than that really about the whole thing. But I think they're. I think it's a situation though where they probably are dispassionate, and we're very fortunate that way. I think, you know, we know how to give love, and love is a powerful weapon. But there again, I think in the Bible when it states to turn the other cheek, and we have that in the Dead Sea Scrolls, the same phrase, I think that's primarily behavior modification. And because, you know, woe betide any person that tries to harm a child if the mother's present. The mother's not going to turn the other cheek, and they shouldn't, I don't think. And my personal philosophy there on trying to avert a conflict is to try to convert your adversary's belief structure to coincide with your own. Then you don't have a disagreement, and you don't have any type of conflict. But it's sometimes hard to do. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Arizona, can you tell us who did you see at satanic rituals in the United States? And you name people. I mean, it's up to you.
Okay, the question is, who did I see at the rituals in the United States? Okay. Okay, William F. Buckley Jr., Clinton, although he's not a shape-shifting reptilian. I don't care what websites are saying, he's not. Hillary, who isn't either. Well, they might as well be. Al Gore, George Sr. I don't have a recollection of the current president, George W. I don't, but I don't have a recollection of them. I do of their father. Ronald Reagan. Well, yeah, Kissinger. Cheney, I don't have a recollection of for some reason. I don't know why. I don't have a recollection of Bob Hope. Yes. Lawrence Gardner, yes. Madeleine Albright. Well, gee. Oh, there was, and this one is not a shape-shifting reptilian, but Pamela Harriman. When she came to the United States from England, she was grooming Clinton for his role to be president, and this was starting in about 1977 that I know of, and she was a grand dame in the Illuminati. Admiral Harriman. She was, you know, kind of the head of the Democratic Party in this country, and now look who's running the Democratic Party. But her condition that she wanted, what she wanted was, she wanted to be the ambassador to France, which is what she got. And her death was not a drowning accident; it wasn't an accident. And it was something that she consented to. But you know, there are others that have been at rituals. Colin Powell is one, and Steven Spielberg. but he's I don't know if they just have their thumb on him or yeah, well, it feels like that. It feels like that to me. I know he's a Bilderberger too. I don't have a memory about Bill Gates. The other one I know that is highly involved, is also involved with the Janus agency, is Bill Draper and William Draper. And I don't know. It doesn't mean they weren't there. It just means that, this is hard for me to dredge up a whole lot of people.
Chase them around in the wheelchair.
I don't know. It would be dishonest for me to say yeah, and keep going on, because this is, it's very hard.
But McCain looks like Tony to me, so does Bradley. All of them. Well, their eyes, they really look like lizards. I mean, look at the Queen's eyes. If you watch them all closely, like one, you can see him as skin tone.
As far as I know, he's not reptilian. I mean, well, he can be very human and be very evil. I think the more that you hang with that crowd, the more you become like them.
Are the shape changers cold-blooded? I mean, are they not equal, whatever degrees in temperature, cold-blooded?
Well, they can't have human form and be cold-blooded like that. They can't maintain a human body, even though they can shape-shift.
Okay, the ones that aren't shape-shifting, the other ones, are they cold-blooded?
Yeah, they're pretty cold-blooded. They are very sensitive to cold, so they like a lot of humid heat.
Okay, now the shape-shifters, is there a way for us to identify by foods that they don't like, or smells that they don't like, or something we can see in their eyes, or a smell they may have in their body? Is there any way for us to identify?
As far as I know, that's in my experience, it's identifiable by the aura, and it's by senses other than the eyes. Although if sometimes, I wonder about people if I was just looking at them with my eyes. But on TV camera, if you see any of them on television, the cameras have a very hard time maintaining, they get blurry on TV. I noticed that, and sometimes looking at them in person, I watch sometimes, it's just like the skin on the face, it seems to keep scaling. Overseas. Oh, Arthur. You have opened up a can of worms, a can of reptiles. I have talked about the royals in Britain, and Diana wasn't. Well, I believe she's very mind-controlled. Yeah. And this is what the Queen Mother, Philip, Charles, they are like this. This is what they do. And I have seen this. I was there and I saw it, and it just, I wondered when I was a child why I was so attracted to things Japanese, but I had been over there and had been trained to, be there, and I've seen this. I don't think there's any country where you won't see it. What was told to me by Credo Mutwa was that Robert Mugabe is a shape-shifting reptilian, and he's very bloodthirsty. And I have to say, you know, at this point I'm bringing Credo Mutwa into it because he is pleading for people in the United States to recognize the hell that they are going through over there in Africa, and all the children that are disappearing there and are murdered, and all of the children that disappear underground, and that they're purposely being infected with AIDS to be wiped out there. And this is part of the elite's plan to decimate Africa. So it's just something I needed to bring up because this man was practically in tears over it.
Yeah, for minerals, for the land.
Arizona, mentioned President Reagan, Ronald Reagan, and you think, well, good old Ronnie, would he be up to this? What we do know about Reagan is, from a historical standpoint, is that the book Dark Victory, revealed his organized crime connections, with the Hollywood mob. But more important than that was the fact that the outbreak of World War II, it's a matter of record that Reagan, accompanied by the Duke of Windsor, who was a neo-Nazi sympathizer, and Errol Flynn, who actually ran a Nazi spy ring, all three of them went to the Bahamas for a meeting with Dr. Urban. Dr. Urban was one of the leading members of the Nazi Gestapo at the time. Now, you could argue that, well, maybe he's an FBI informant and he was just monitoring, working undercover. However, Adolf Eichmann's superior in the early part of World War II was Baron Otto von Boschwing, and it was von Boschwing, in fact, that came up with the final solution of the Jews. And von Boschwing then, after getting Eichmann organized in the SS, to exterminate the Jews, von Boschwing then was dispatched to Romania as part of the SS Iron Guard. That's a very elite group within the SS. And he was notorious for his atrocities, such as skinning children, skinning Jewish children alive, hanging adult Jews on meat hooks, and then branding them with a kosher meat brand. Hideous person. Well, what happened to him? Immediately after the end of the war, the OSS brought him to this country. He formed a computer company later on in the Bay Area called TCI. And he had a protege who was also his private secretary called Helena von Damme. And she became Governor Reagan's private secretary when he was governor of California. Then she was taken into the White House as his White House secretary for about half of his administration until he promoted her and appointed her foreign ambassador. The frightening thing about it is that the entire Reagan cabinet was selected from a list that she gave Reagan. So in other words, Reagan, as far as I can see, was running a cabinet that was actually a continuation of the Third Reich. And also, somebody was telling me recently that his Bel Air address is number 668. Now, it's standard nowadays for high-level Satanists not to have, they all want the postal address to be 666 for obvious reasons. However, it looks too obvious to the public, so they cut a deal with the post office where the post office takes the 666 actual location but assigns it number 668. Now, I haven't confirmed this, but somebody recently assured me that he's been by the Bel Air residence of the Reagans, and it was number 668. I don't know. Any next question? Yes, sir.
President Reagan or President
Carter could be a clone?
Is there any possibility that President Reagan or President Carter could be a clone?
After the accident, after the shot of the Reagan.
Oh, after Reagan was shot. What is known is that he did use a double for a period of time after the attempted assassination, and that's why he made such a miraculous recovery. With Carter, the strange thing is he did disappear, for 2 or 3 weeks. The media didn't know where he was. That's when he supposedly was attacked by a rabbit when he was in a rowboat. And but the interesting thing there was after that incident, he parted his hair on the opposite side, which is pretty unusual for a man to do. So I don't know. I did hear a comment by a high-level intelligence operative many years ago that they had the capability of reproducing a person as a clone in just a few minutes. He said he didn't know how they were doing it, but he said this was 21st century technology. I can't verify that. I do know cloning has gone on for years, but whether Carter or was a robotoid, as they claim, and the same with Reagan, I really don't know that. Incidentally, I should mention that John Hinckley, the person that supposedly shot Reagan, he didn't, because there was a bulletproof open car door between him and Reagan when they pushed him onto the floor of the limo, so he couldn't have shot him. He did shoot Jim Brady, the press secretary. The shot that entered under the armpit of Reagan came from a little mezzanine, and the person that did the shooting had an earpiece, so he was Secret Service. Almost for sure. In fact, Judy Woodruff, the NBC correspondent who was on the site, even mentioned that at the time. Never mentioned it again afterwards. But the interesting thing with John Hinckley, I'd like to mention, is that I do know he was programmed at Lakewood, in Colorado. So I know where, in fact, but I probably get a big lawsuit if I mention it, so I won't. But so Colorado is a very dirty area for this type of thing and for occult activity.
Well, just give the address.
Yes. Yes.
Well, I thought that what was really interesting that Kratos said was about the reason that they're burning and destroying all the rainforest was to kill all the teak wood, because teak is the only wood that can kill a reptilian. And that's why Kratos Mutua spent 5 years carving that, walking stick for his successor, so that he could defend himself.
Yes. Yeah, the statement was that the reason Credo Mutua claims they burned they were burning the rainforest in the Amazon was to destroy the teak wood, because that's the only wood that can kill a reptilian, and that's why he carries a stick or a club that is made of teak wood. I don't really know. The problem is Credo is very, very sick with diabetes, and he's really never recovered after the death of his wife, which we feel was definitely murder, because they did find a metal object inside her, and she had received death threats.
Gouges all over her body.
Yes, and gouges all over her body while she was in hospital. So she was really worked over, and they tried an attempt on Credo, and one of the front wheels came off the car, but luckily he wasn't hurt. As soon as he gets a little better, we will maintain communication. I'll ask him about that at that time.
Didn't they also kill his son?
I'm not certain whether they did or not. Yes, he didn't mention that to me. No.
They infected his daughter with AIDS.
Oh, they did infect his daughter with AIDS, and yes, ma'am.
I would like to know from Arizona if she feels that she's ever had surgery, or are her psychic powers natural, or have you had any work done on your pineal gland? Do you know?
Okay, the question was, did I ever have surgery, or did they do something to the pineal gland to make me more psychic, or is it natural? As far as I know, it's natural. It's inherited. It came down through my mother's side. She was very psychic. And I had one sister that was psychic. I don't know the extent of her abilities because she seems to have been left alone. My son is very psychic, and he showed this as a child. And he is also very involved. I don't know about my daughter because I haven't had a chance to know her. But is the one thing that I did know that something that had gone on with me was that I had in the mid 90s, actually it was about probably 1993. I was working with a therapist who was internationally known, worked with survivors of mind control, ritual abuse, and I told him that, and I had no idea where this was coming from, but I came into therapy and I said, David, they have injected me with an implant, and he says, well, how do you know that? How could that be? And I said, because I don't know. It's very, very small, and they did it through a syringe and a needle, and it was injected along with radioisotope material that has an affinity for a certain area of the brain, and that's where it is, and it's there. And this was about the time also that I told him they had put something in my uterus and I didn't know what it is. Turned out they impregnated me. But what happened is it was for some reason about a year and a half after I had said that, and I don't remember what exactly was the incident, but they did an X-ray of the brain in the area, and they were around the area of the pituitary. And what they saw there, what came back in that X-ray were 6 basically cube shapes that were around the pituitary. They were evenly spaced pretty much, and they were surrounding the pituitary. And what I asked the doctor, what is that? And he said, oh, well, that's normal. That's what you get. You get, calcification around the pituitary as you get older. Well, he said it was a pituitary. But then another doctor that looked at it said pineal, that it's not pituitary. Well, they're both, one was saying pituitary, the other saying pineal. And I'm looking at these 6, things and noting that they're kind of cube-shaped and saying that's not normal. And so nothing, was ever done about that. Nothing more was said, and I don't even know what happened to the X-ray. But then I noted that, it was about 6 months later I was pursuing it. They had CAT scans. The doctor finally, I bugged him till he did CAT scans. CAT scans showed nothing there. And then a year later, another doctor did an MRI. Nothing showed up. It was gone. And so I recently ran into somebody I was telling this to, and he's been very involved with this sort of thing and on the end of knowing what it is that was being done. And he said that was, there was some kind of implant that was done, and it was done the way that I said it was done, and that if you don't do upkeep on it, it has to be maintained, that there's some kind of injectable something that maintains it, that these are kind of crystalline based structures, and if you don't maintain it, then they just kind of, disappear, and that the things disappeared. And the one thing, it made sense to me, because there is absolutely no way that they have the manpower or the time or the money to go around following people and keeping tabs on people, since there are so many people that they are definitely keeping under surveillance. There's no way they can do this, and there's no way they can employ all of the phone systems and everything else, and this is an easy, cheap way to do it. So that's, I don't have any doubt that this is what happened, because I was very remarkably accurate when I said, gee, they're doing this to me or that to me. And I might not have understood it completely, but I was accurate. Radioactive isotopes that have an affinity for, they use these in medical science or in medicine all the time. There are radioactive isotopes that have affinity for the lungs, some that have affinity for the brain.
To do treadmills to see what the circulation is, like they'll inject an isotope and you get on a treadmill and then you have the x-rays before, then you get on the treadmill
Right.
and then it puts you back on and it shows
Right.
what the circulation is. That's radioactive. I have one there.
Yeah, and what she's talking about radioactive isotopes, testing for it was lung capacity, right? And heart capacity. I had another, I know that this is so also because I had at Harbor UCLA Medical Center, the first doctor that I saw was into seeing if there's biologically anything wrong with your brain, and I had all these studies done, and they didn't find anything wrong with my brain, but one of the studies that was done was called a SPECT study. And I don't know what SPECT stands for, but it involved injecting radioactive isotopes. And they went to the lungs first, then it would go to the brain. And it finally settled in the brain, but it was an involved study, and it was about a 3-step study before they could monitor what your brain did when you had to answer mathematical questions or versus reading. As far as implants, yes. Yeah, I believe implants are being widely used. This is a cheap, effective way to monitor.
There's a very insidious type of implant being used now. It's made from synthetic protein, very microscopic, but it's a very, very powerful microprocessing system built into it. And what they do is to attach it to a specific type of virus that they know will migrate to a specific part of the body. So if you wish to put an implant in a person's brain, you can just intravenously inject it, and then the virus, if it's a neural oriented virus, then it would carry the little microprocessor to your brain. Or if you need a subcutaneous type, then it will take it, different type of virus will pull it under your skin. Then there's another type which has a very minute lithium battery, and the batteries recharge through temperature fluctuations of the body. And the major body fluctuations are either on the back of the hand or in your third eye area of your forehead. If it's stored in the back of the hand, and a lot of GIs had this one in the Vietnam War to stimulate the adrenaline flow when they went into battle. But if you put it in the third eye area of a young girl who's just gone through puberty, she'll go into immediate menopause. And the World Health Organization has been covertly installing these in a lot of third world children. Very insidious thing. Yes. Yeah.
My question was, when they put those little cubes in there, do you feel that this helped your psychic abilities or made you more psychic than you already were at that time? Or clairvoyant or whatever, did it enhance your abilities, in other words?
Okay, the question is, when they put these little cubes in my brain, did I feel that it helped enhance psychic abilities or not, or make me more clairvoyant? No, I don't believe that was the purpose of the implants. I believe that the purpose of the implants was suggestibility and monitoring. But the one thing with the multiple personality disorder, the way that I always heard it explained was that if you are schizophrenic, you're going to hear the voices from outside. And if you had multiple personality disorder, that you were going to hear these voices coming from inside. I don't believe that that always is classically true. With implants, will get you will also hear, appear to hear suggestions, or you will have urges to do some sort of behavior that is being transmitted to you. And it's also just plain and simple a monitoring device. There are protein-based implants also. It can't be detected by X-ray or MRI or CAT scan. And these also are, I think they're tracking devices. But it's very advanced technology. It's something that most people don't think of. It's something that when you're going the route of being in therapy for, dealing with multiple personality disorder, it's something that the therapists don't deal with, that you might have suggestibility or be hearing things because you have an implant, and it messes up therapy. It complicates things.
Yeah, if you have a signal with a wavelength of 2.33 feet or a higher harmonic thereof, you could beam it at somebody and they will hear voices inside their head, or at a higher harmonic still. They won't hear the voices consciously, but the subconscious will react to that command. So you can make them do anything you wish, and they'll think they're doing it out of their own volition. And this is what we call directed energy weapon systems. They're being promoted now in the media as non-lethal weapons. That's baloney. You can easily kill somebody with these, or command somebody, as they do with a person like Eric Harris, one of the Columbine shooters, to do the killing. And in the case of Eric Harris, he was bitterly complaining at 10 years of age when he and his father were at Plattsburgh Air Force Base in upstate New York, that he was being drugged and they were doing funny things to him in a subterranean area. And I've checked out that base, and although theoretically it has closed down, it's still active underground, as is Montauk. And in actual fact, there's 8 levels below ground, and then there's a highway that goes to another base 300 miles away. And this is the insidious thing with these poor kids being prosecuted for schoolyard crimes, and they're not responsible. There's I won't mention the name, but there is one religious organization that is very big in programming kids at Sunday school for these kind of activities, and it's happening all over the world, all over the country. And this is why it's so insidious that prosecutors would prosecute these people. Either these prosecutors are totally incompetent and know nothing whatsoever about mind control, and they should, because it's so. There's between 2 and 10 million mind-controlled people in this country, as far as we can determine. So either they're totally incompetent, and therefore they shouldn't be in a prosecutorial position, or they're very, very dirty, and therefore they should be in the dock. They can't have it any other way. Yes. Any other questions? Yes. Yes. Oh, sorry, this lady. Yes.
Well, as far as children are concerned, are there certain things that we as caring adults should be on the lookout for that are red flags, warning signs, or are there certain types of, say, medical procedures that somebody might be going through that are more likely to be someplace where they would be implanted?
Very good question. The question was, should adults be on the lookout for signals given off in effect by children that they could be subjected to any behavior modification? I know several symptoms, but I think Arizona will probably know more, so I'll hand it over to her.
Do they go to public school? That's one.
Do
Go to public school.
the children?
Yeah, that could be one.
Well, it can be public school, it can be private school, it can be any school. I mean, my daughter was, she was going to a Christian school, and there was ritual abuse going on at the school. And I know that one for a fact, and another child had reported the same thing. My daughter, I will use her as an example. I can use my son as an example too. I didn't recognize it when my son was a child because I didn't recognize anything in myself at that time. By the time I figured it out, my daughter was in school. And what I saw with both children was that they both had been diagnosed with hyperactivity disorder, attention deficit disorder. They were, and I was diagnosed that way too as a child. I was diagnosed as hyperactive. And daydreaming, a lot of daydreaming, just kind of, out of it. An increased tendency to, flip your words, or the letters, look at them and a D looks like a B and a B looks like a D. And sometimes the words would just jumble. So you're getting also mixed up with someone who is dyslexic because you have a lot of, children are usually, that are involved in this are very creative anyways. And then all of the kind of way that they kind of screw around with their brain and turn it inside out, they get trained to have the ability to see things in a very, they're very spatially oriented with their mind. Well, that is another one. You will see eye color change with a lot of children. I mean, you're normally more going to see it with fair-skinned people. You're going to see the eyes change color. If they tend to be gray-eyed or blue-eyed or green-eyed or even hazel-eyed, you're going to see it more likely. But I have heard of dark-skinned children also having an eye, going from brown eyes to something of a very dark blue. In males, you end up, when a child is older, in male children, you're going to see a skin tone change if they're switching personalities, if they're DID. You usually see an ash color to the face. As far as behavior, they will just, you might be talking to them about some subject, and then all of a sudden they're going to switch to start talking about something completely different, have behavior that they don't remember later. They seem to change, their personality seems to change. They have fear of objects, household items. They seem to have a strange fear for something. One of my sisters, and I know that my sisters were messed with, they just weren't messed with in the same way as I was, had a deadly fear of soap in the bathtub that was broken in pieces. She just used to scream. If the soap broke, she'd scream, "Broken soap, broken soap." And she was terrified of it. The children will have nightmares, night terrors. I went through this with my son. I went through it. You just wake up screaming in the night. You don't, you don't even, a lot of times don't even remember that you were screaming in the night. And my son used to get up and just start walking around, and he peed in the hall. He thought that was the bathroom or something. And you try talking to them, and they're just not awake. They're not awake. The brain is undergoing some kind of activity where they're not awake. And what also at this point is interesting to note was that when my therapist, one of the therapists I had right before I stopped therapy, I had her for like 2.5 years, and she had EEG biofeedback equipment. When she got me on that equipment, she said, "You're walking around in a delta state." And I said, what does that mean? She said, well, delta state is what you see in deep sleep. You're awake, and you're walking around in delta. And delta is, what's I understand is that what the programmers do with delta, I call it the off switch. And what you get with when someone's wide awake walking around in delta, they're just ready to be signaled in some way to react, and all someone has to do is turn the switch on, but they're just out to lunch. And I was out to lunch, and I had to do a lot of work with her in order to get to, where I'm going in a beta, a very bearable beta state. I couldn't handle being in a beta state when we first tried working with this, with entrainment. And I had to just try and be in an alpha state for the time being. But it was very easy to invoke theta with me. Extremely easy. That was the one thing and the way I wanted to go, apparently, when we tried to do entrainment. So my therapist also came to the conclusion that the brain entrainment with EEG biofeedback equipment is not good to use for someone that is very programmed, because you're tending to go into this opposite state of what you want to be in. You don't want to walk out of a session like that and be, in a theta or delta state. You want to be in, at the very least, an alpha state, and you want to be in a beta state to be functional. So it took a lot of time with me, and I had to do a lot of other things besides the EEG biofeedback, because that just doesn't, it's not useful. It's useful if you want to relax, or if you're too much in a beta state. But with mind control, it's a different matter. Something else that I've also seen with children that have, symptoms of being involved in this is I see a lot of symptoms of sexual abuse. It goes with the territory. They start out, they want to traumatize a child, and the worst violation that you can ever do on a child to teach them they have, that they're going to be violated, that they have no power, that they can't prevent what's happening, and they can't run and they can't hide, is to sexually violate a child. And also, the anal rape they will do with a child, because it's also screwing up Kundalini energy with the children. So you will see the symptoms, with a child of, you will see constipation accompanied by bleeding fissures in the anus. I suffered from that. My son suffered from that. My daughter suffered from that. You see a child not wanting to have bowel movements because it simulates the act of being raped or having something inserted in the anus. A lot of times they won't, with a girl, they're not going to do much to her vaginally. They will not try to rape a little girl because they don't want that to be seen. It's obvious, and these people are masters at hiding things like this in a child. So sometimes it's very subtle, and the child is also told, if you tell, we're going to kill your family. If you tell, we're going to burn your house down, or we're going to hang your dog, or, and they'll kill little animals in front of the child to demonstrate that they're serious. Sometimes a child will have a great fear, when they're older, they're having a great fear of being maimed, or from around the age of 6 to 10, they have a great fear of seeing anyone that has an amputated limb. It scares them. And mutilation scares them. Cuts scare them. This is natural in a child, anyways, at this age, to have these fears. But it is very magnified in children that are being abused in this way. They will come out with strange statements about that they fear for the safety of a parent or a child because they're always being threatened. They also are very good at keeping secrets. And they will talk about things in a roundabout way. What I saw going on with my daughter was very obvious. I didn't know what to look for with my son. And by the time it got to my daughter, it was really obvious. She came out with talking about the girls, and the girls were other parts. And the girls had names. The girls had names like Bone Spitter, Money Lover, Julia, and Wog, which stands for Wily Oriental Gentleman, which is British term for someone of Indian or Oriental descent.
Very derogatory.
It's derogatory, yeah. And she would talk about the people watching me do this. You know, Mommy, the people, and how angry the moon is. And she made references to sex. She openly masturbated herself. You see this with children. I mean, at that age, they're going to masturbate.
She was 6 years
But
of age.
yeah, she was 6 years of age, and you're going to see this with children. But when you see a child rubbing themselves all over an adult male, any adult male, and spreading their legs in front of adult males and assuming position, you know, and trying to insert, you know, being held by an adult male and then trying to insert objects into the vagina, that's a little bit abnormal.
What about compulsive disorders?
Compulsive disorders? Okay. Yeah, the obsessive compulsive disorders very much go with the territory. I've seen this kind of repeated behavior. I've seen it in other survivors, and I had some of this behavior myself. By repeating the act over and over and over again, you know, of doing something like, you know, what falls into the category is like having to have items that you you steal all the towels out of the hospital, or you're shoplifting, or you're compulsively got to do this, or
Exercise.
exercise is another one. By doing that behavior, you don't have to deal with what is the root of the behavior.
Or cutting your arm.
Oh, the arm cutting too. Yeah, I started doing that. I was cutting my arms, and I never cut to the extent that some of the other survivors did that I saw. They were deep cuts these people did, and they'd put corrosive things, you know, like toilet bowl cleaner in the cuts. And they did this because also when you mutilate yourself, when you burn yourself, or you cut yourself, or even when you purge, you know, through bulimia, and I did that too. When you do that, you're putting pressure on the brain, or when you cut yourself, what you're basically doing with cutting or burning or harming yourself in some way is causing the brain to put out a huge amount of endorphins, because people that are traumatized at an early age have a greater number of opiate cell receptors in the brain, and they require the trauma to release the endorphins to get a high. Now, what the cults do, and what the perpetrators do, is they tell you if you start to remember, you need to hurt yourself. And Crowley did this with his followers, as a matter of fact. Aleister Crowley used to tell his followers to hurt themselves. And this was to put them in a dissociated state, in a high state, plus they didn't remember things that had been done to them. And so the people are told to do this to themselves. The thing that made it hard for me was that every time that when I cut my arms, I was punished. And I couldn't figure it out at first, because they were telling me I couldn't have any marks on my body. And I saw other survivors cutting themselves, and I thought, gee, there must be some relief in this, so I'm going to do it too. And I started cutting my left arm. And every time I did it, I was severely punished for it. Because when you're bloodline, you're told you can't mark your skin. You can't even get a sunburn. And an example that that this really does happen is, just for example, when one of my cousins was in the Marines, he was told, "You're government property now, and if you get a sunburn, you're going to get it, in trouble. You can't even get a sunburn." So this makes sense. But there are all kinds of things that go with symptomology in children, and you have to know what to look for, and you have to understand that it's legally it's a big mess if you try and get a child to talk to you about it. It's a mess anyways, because they make it a mess. You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, because I was accused by the Anaheim Police Department of bribing my daughter to talk if she spoke in the Anaheim Police Station. And they said that I bribed her, that I would take her to Chuck E. Cheese if she talked. And it's a terrible situation, and it's very hard. There's no right way of dealing with it. And I understand that what goes on in California, down in San Diego County, with the social services for children, is that if a mother reports that this is happening to her child, they usually go and take the child away. So it's really bad.
If I can add one or two comments to that. Last week, Buford Furrow pleaded guilty to shooting up the Jewish Community Center in LA. This was to avoid a death sentence. Now, if you happen to see any TV footage of a year prior to the shooting incident, there was some stock footage that showed him demanding to be taken to a psychiatric facility in Washington State. And they showed him struggling with the police, because the police were trying to keep him out of the entrance to the facility, and he was trying to get in, and he had a short sleeve shirt, and you could see all these fresh diagonal slashes across his left forearm. And also at the time of his arrest, and you see also he did the shooting. The police were supposedly looking for him everywhere in LA, and he just calmly drove all the way to Vegas, which is about a 5-hour drive from LA, and then immediately drove up to an FBI facility there and surrendered. Why did he go all that way and then surrender to the FBI of all people? And so that's a strange anomaly in that case. Also, at the time of the shooting, he had, there was an email address, Buford E. Furrow, McCord Air Force Base, NSC. In other words, National Security Council had a facility within the McCord Air Force Base, and both Buford Furrow and his father before him were stationed there at McCord. And the very next day, that email address just vanished. So there's a lot of anomalies in that case, and he was clearly mind-controlled, and poor guy's incarcerated for life. I also should caution you that many TV programs and also movies contain triggers to reinforce the programming of mind-controlled people. It's very, very prevalent these days. So that's something to watch out for. Oh, yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Me or him?
Yeah, yes, you, ma'am. I
was
think
gonna
you
ask
you were first, yeah.
Did you feel any danger when Arizona moved in with you? Were you worried in any way that you would become a target?
It's a good question, because, and a thing I should caution you, if you wish to get involved there in assisting mind control survivors that need help, and they really do need help, and if you can help them, but bear in mind that when a person's being programmed, they usually have 2,000 or 3,000 alter personalities have been encoded in them. Nowadays, it's often done electronically with a band that's put around the head, and they'll run about 100,000 volts through the head and cause the mind to split into all these various personalities. Then they program each one, give them an access code so they can pull each alter personality forwards individually, and they'll all have pre-assigned tasks. What they always have are a number of defense alters that will protect the programming at all cost, and if necessary, so they'll program the person to lie if necessary, just to protect the program. If you try to hypnotically regress them, it tends to reinforce the programming many, many times over. So you can't. It's very dangerous to do that. What the defensive alters will do, if necessary, is they'll kill the therapist. So you've got to be very careful. Yeah, we had some interesting situations there. Plus the fact we were under intense attack psychically from people such as the NSA, and also with directed energy attacks. And it would even, the energy was so strong it would even change channels or change modes on a TV, on a tape recorder, and switch it on and off, things like that. So we've had some interesting times, but we've weathered through. And
Your sister was telling me because she felt that this place was being blasted.
yes.
Last
Mm.
August.
Yeah.
They videotaped the license plates in the parking lot.
I'm sorry.
I've heard that at this conference they videotaped the license plates in the parking lot.
Yes, the statement was made, but that they've videotaped the license plates in the parking lot. I'm sure they do. There are more than one federal informant here. We recognize them, and the good thing about it is we can get information back that way to the powers that be, and my phone's always tapped because the whole point is the Illuminati structure is based upon fear. And just as with, if you noticed, when they demolish a large building in this country, most of the demolitions are supervised by a very, very petite Chinese lady. And but she's an expert at knowing where to place those charges to pull out the underpinnings of the building, and the whole structure collapses. And it's the same thing here with the Illuminati. If you can get enough fear imparted into the lower echelons of the Illuminati, and also make it quite clear that we know their innermost secrets. And this is a great thing with working with mind control survivors of high-level Illuminati survivors. This is the Rosetta Stone, because we've uncovered so much of the information they never thought anybody could decode. And now, I must admit, I don't think we would ever safely access the deepest altars in any mind control person. By normal means, anyway. We are working in that area now to see if we could do some work there electronically. But we're uncovering an awful lot of data because the Illuminati and the military personnel that do the programming, they're so darn arrogant. They think that the public could never access anything, and so they tend to reveal a lot of information there with the encoded data, the stuff in there that you shouldn't have encoded, because we can get it out. So this is the great thing with having your phone tapped. You can get that information back to them. It creates a lot of fear. They're going down. I can't publicly reveal some of the ways. This is done peacefully, and some of it was done monetarily. One of the great things in the world today is that the Asian countries have what they call ASEAN, and that's a coalition of 14 Asian nations, plus now Japan, China, and South Korea have joined them. And they know darn well the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, is bankrupt, and they're so fed up with the fact the IMF for years has forced third world nations to accept money, and in return they have to use their natural resources as collateral, and they run them, and also they have to make draconian cuts in their social services, which causes civil unrest. And so the Asian countries now are forming their own international monetary fund, and now the IMF and the U.S. dollars, going down the tube. It's estimated there will be something like $10 trillion will evaporate out of the U.S. economy this year, but in so doing, because the Illuminati powers that be have printed so much worthless paper money, they're unraveling. And also there's tremendous infighting at the top because now they feel the creation of the world government is close. Each faction, such as the Windsors versus the Vatican, etc., all want the biggest slice of the pie. And so they're coming apart. And so don't let this whole scenario get you down. We're going to win. And I think we've got a lot of help coming from other realms within the universe, which I don't wish to talk about now, but it's coming. So there's a lot of hope. Any other? Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Getting back to the committees, in The Biggest Secret, David Icke says that Jackie, performed rituals. So I guess I'm a little bit confused as to, JFK receiving a copy of the book. Wasn't he involved at all, or because he did have, bloodline and all that?
The question was, in David Icke's book, The Biggest Secret, was JFK involved in any of the rituals?
Junior.
Oh, Junior, I'm sorry. Jackie performing rituals. I don't know. It would appear that JFK Sr. was using sex slaves about 14 years old. It was one of the things he was up to. They're not a very nice family. I don't know about Junior. Did you have any comments on that? Or with Jackie being involved in rituals? One person I can tell you was surprisingly was a high priestess. This was of the Solar Temple cult. And this particular one was a spin-off of the one that the members were committing suicide like crazy in Switzerland, France, and in Canada. And there was a variant of that Solar Temple cult and in Europe. And it was attended by the head of the French Secret Service. And Princess Grace Kelly was the high priestess of that one. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
You mentioned the magic square of the sun and
Yes.
how it adds up to 66.
Yes.
How many of these Gothic cathedrals are still standing in Europe? Is the Chartres Cathedral that has the labyrinth, is that one of them?
Yeah. The question is, the magic square of the sun adds up to 666. That's vertically, horizontally, and diagonally. And
The walls are 666 feet
no.
tall.
So the question is, the Gothic cathedrals of Europe, do they contain the magic square 666, and especially Chartres? Chartres does. Some of them use the magic square of Mars. Lichfield Cathedral, that's a Gothic cathedral in England, that has that one. But Gothic, it's a number of Gothic cathedrals. They built a lot. Yeah. No, I don't know. It's a good question. Probably about 40 altogether. But when you go into a Gothic cathedral, because they use the magic squares to build into the dimensions, the New Jerusalem that descended on the plain of Pupusa in Turkey, according to the Montanists, who were the originators of Pentecostalism, the dimensions they're quoted in the book of Revelation gives you the magic square 666 as well. Yeah. No. It's just the numbers in the square, or you can incorporate them into the dimensions of the structure, and what that does, it puts the interior of the cathedral in resonance with the cosmos. So then, when you go in and you pray or you do meditation in there, you automatically attune to the cosmos. And that's why you don't get the feeling in modern churches that you get in the Gothic cathedrals. And what maybe I should point out, how do they get the money to build these magnificent, the most wonderful, I feel they're the most wondrous structures on earth, far more important than the Great Pyramid, which is just a water pump, quite frankly, to irrigate the city that's under the sand on the Giza Plateau. The Gothic cathedrals, the funding was initiated by Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, the person, the brains and financial power behind the founding of the Templars. And at that time in Britain, or in Europe, usury was forbidden, and they had what they call the tally system. And it's a wonderful system whereby, for instance, if you wanted to buy a merchant ship and do some trading, you may put down, say, 10%, the bank would put down 90%, and then you would take 10% of the profits of each trip and gradually put more and more money into the thing. That gives you more ownership. Well, then if for some reason maybe you got seasick and you wanted to go ashore, you wouldn't lose your investment. Whoever that ship was then sold to, you would still have that percentage ownership along with the bank, and so you didn't lose out. It was a great system, and while that was in place for 400 years in Europe, a price of a loaf of bread never changed. And that was used quite extensively in the Confederate States here in the U.S., and very, very effectively. And that was the main reason for the Civil War. Lincoln was actually quite a racist, and when slaves escaped and then volunteered to join the Northern Army, he had them shipped back down south again. And Lincoln was actually an illegitimate offspring of the Rothschilds. And so what they wanted to do was to free the slaves, because the slaves were debt-free because they were slaves. As soon as they were freed and made sharecroppers, they were in debt for the rest of their lives. And so there's a lot more into the Civil War and its causes than we have you believe. But if we could go back to the tally system again and dispense with usury, and so there'd be no interest on loans, everybody would prosper, including the banks, and then we could start building Gothic cathedrals again. It'd be fun. Yes, ma'am.
Speaking of Gothic cathedrals, is there any particular reason there was a Gothic cathedral built in Washington, D.C.?
I think they tried to continue it. Yeah, they actually used architects who had studied the Gothic structures to get that resonant atmosphere inside. And they had a problem getting enough architects that knew what they were doing there on sacred geometry. I don't know about that one. St. John the Divine in New York, definitely. That's a headquarter, or has been. I haven't checked it recently. For many years, it's been the headquarters of the really satanic Wicca movement in this country. Well, that's when Canon West was running the operation, and he was the Queen of England's protocol officer. I don't know if you remember, there was a case maybe about 15 years or more ago now. Wayne Williams, I believe his name was, in Atlanta. He was an African-American that was convicted for serial killing. In actual fact, he was a procurer for a satanic cult, and that cult was actually run out of St. John the Divine. It's a bizarre cathedral. Yeah. Yes, Arthur.
Yes, the reptilian DNA has more lifespan. That's what I've heard. And this, this hybrid is, shapeshifter has the same kind of same lifespan for the human. Why is that? Which is that?
Well,
it's supposed
yes.
to live longer than the 100% human DNA.
Well, what they it's a question of do the half-breeds and have a longer life, or why do they have a similar lifespan to the full-blooded ones? Is that correct? We really don't see the full-bloods around because they're subterranean nearly all the time. But the half-breeds, you see, what they're really doing is they can then absorb the soul of somebody else, another high-level person in the Illuminati, and have a new life. And they seem to, isn't it 600 years, Arizona?
Around, it's average 600.
Yeah, they have a total lifespan of about 600 years that way.
And the shapeshifter has, say, 50% of reptilian DNA.
Mm-hmm.
And isn't it the way make it the lifespan longer? Hybrids.
I don't know. The question was with a half-breed with reptilian with 50-50 DNA, reptilian and human, does that prolong the lifespan? I don't know. Incidentally, with high-level Illuminati people, such as the Grand Dames, etc., there's a specific time when they have to die, and they have to consent to being murdered, ritually murdered, usually bludgeoned to death in a ceremony. And then the new Grand Dame who will take that woman's place, then inhales the dying breath of the old one and supposedly inherits the soul, that absorbs the soul that way, and that's standard. And then they supposedly have the ability to capture a soul. And they have, I've heard Cisco mention she's seen the containers in Pindar's castle where they contain them. And certainly in Princess Diana's death, they had to commit the murder in the tunnel because the Alma tunnel was an old Illuminati ritual murder place, a sacrificial site, and that's why they put the Illuminati flame above the tunnel entrance after her death. But there are photographs available that's showing her sitting in the ambulance. She just wasn't that injured. And that's when they killed her, I think, in the ambulance. And they had to do it in the tunnel so they could capture the soul very surreptitiously. And I think, it's a bad scene, what happened. I was told, actually, by a high-level member of the Illuminati that she was actually bludgeoned to death, more or less ceremoniously there in the tunnel. And that's why you've got the discrepancy between the hospital that stated she died 90 minutes after she was admitted to the hospital, and then the official autopsy report stated she died 20 minutes after the crash. And then all the video cameras along the route, the traffic video cameras, were all conveniently turned off for about 15 minutes during that period.
Can you talk about bumping souls? I've tried to be bumped twice. Huge pressure on my body. I don't think it moves my right arm. They can't get in because of a Merkaba field, as far as I know. Can you talk about souls being bumped, where we think it's Uncle George, but it's Uncle George's new identity from another world?
Yes. Yeah, the question was, can a soul be bumped out of a body and then replaced by another entity's soul? Yeah, I think I've encountered this in my exorcism work. And sometimes when you're asleep and suddenly you awake in a violent jolt, that's because your astral body has suddenly jumped back into into the physical body to protect it from that very situation. I think this is a case with so-called walk-ins, the same way, where maybe in some cases a soul will agree to voluntarily leave the body to allow another entity in for some specific purpose, maybe very esoteric purpose. I'm glad you mentioned the Merkabic field. That's great protection if you know how to create one. Very powerful. A pentagram, if you visualize a flaming violet pentagram in front of you, that is a very good defense. And I've known people that have caught one person that was astrally projecting into women's bedrooms at night and then materializing. And I taught this woman how to create the pentagram, and he hit one, and he admitted that it hurt him very, very painfully. It really works. And the reason for that, incidentally, is that all the parts of a pentagram are composed of Fibonacci mathematics, and so it's in attunement with the cosmos. Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Did you say that you had heard from a high level of Illuminati that Diana had been bludgeoned to death?
Yeah.
Okay, how come they would tell you that? First of all, why would you know one of them?
Yes. This is one that had been subjected to mind control. And what was happening was, you see, normally when you program somebody, you have a reporting altar programmed into them. And so a person in the middle of the night, if they're programmed, and then if they're being deprogrammed, they will often get up in the middle of the night, and that altar, that reporting altar, will make a phone call back to their handler. And that's why if you feel you are being mind controlled and get recovering memories, check your phone bill. Just to see if you made phone calls you're totally unaware of. And this particular one told me this when she switched. And I know she was in communication with Barangay de Rothschild. He was one of her handlers. So that's how that came about.
So I've always thought of the Druids as a good group of people, but I wondered, I heard something recently that they were able to generate a lot of negative energy.
Oh, well, they do. It just depends on the grade of a druid, and especially the later ones became very degenerate. The earlier ones, though, yeah, they had a lot of good points. Often, in times of stress, a high-level druid would volunteer to be ritually strangled, and then they bury them or throw them into the lake. And they had this habit of throwing all this gorgeous filigree gold jewelry that they made into the lakes as well as a sacrificial offering. But they did have one of the important grades was that of the black man. And these were a group of very high-level druids that specialized in predicting rain. And that's where the term the Merlin comes from. Because, see, the Merlin is not the name of a person, it's an agnomen, which just as the Satan, in the book of Job, which is an Arabic work, actually much older than the rest of the Old Testament, the Satan there is described as a servant of God who sits at his right hand. And the same with the Merlin. This was a rank, and it's not the name. Anytime you read a New Age book about King Arthur, and they just mention Merlin being a person, forget it. That person hasn't done their homework. And but yeah, it's always a person known as the Black Man, or the rank of the Druid known as the Black Man, who became the Merlin. So there's a lot of Merlins through about the first 5 centuries AD. Yes.
Isn't that like a Dr. George or something like that?
Pardon?
Like Merlin George, Dr. George? No?
I'm not with you on that one. Oh, somebody asked me, was there something about Dr. George? I don't know.
It's a title.
Yes. Oh, I see what you mean. Yes, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, it is a title. Yeah.
Do you still
Yes.
believe that O.J. Simpson is still innocent of those 2 crimes?
The question is, do I believe that O.J. Simpson is innocent of killing his ex-wife? Yeah. Yeah, I think you'll find, if you do your homework, that his mother was a member of Jim Jones's staff at Mendocino State Mental Institution. The purpose there was it's a lot of African American kids were taken away from the foster parents and put into that mental institution. What they actually did at the beginning of the project was to actually fire everybody in the hospital, even down to the janitor, and replace them with a CIA programming team. And then these kids were programmed and then shipped off to Jonestown. And Jim, it's my understanding that O.J.'s mother was on Jim Jones's staff there. And curiously enough, after I met Arizona, she told me that Mendocino State Mental Institution was one of the places that Joseph Mengele used to go to at that time period. So it all fits. And I first became suspicious watching him at the trial, and he was shifting. And that's why I think they wouldn't dare put him on the stand. But the reason why the murder came about was there's a major coke dealer by the name of Joey Ippolito, and apparently Nicole and Ron Goldman, so the story goes anyway, what I found out is that they wanted to set up a restaurant in Beverly Hills, and they figured if they could sell enough coke, then they could get the restaurant going. And OJ got a large consignment of coke on their behalf, and they gave it to the Jet Set friends to distribute. And unfortunately, the Jet Set group held some wild parties and blew the lot, and so a contract was taken out on their lives. And I think I'm not going to mention the name, but I believe I know the person who actually did the murder, and he's a CIA hitman who also worked for the Guatemala death squads. And his MO was to torture a person with a stiletto and then slash their throats. And he was a very close friend of Joey, and also Joey's bodyguard was the OJ's best friend. So that's the basic story there. Pardon? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. Any more questions? Yes. Yes, Arthur.
You mentioned about Lord Enlil.
Yes, Enlil. Yes.
Agriculture.
Yes.
And Enki and the Inanna Dimji.
Yes.
Well, how these Sumerian gods fit into this history of the earth?
Good. Oh, okay. The question is, how did the Sumerian deities such as Enlil, etc., fit into this whole scheme of things? I think basically there's a chronological problem. The Anunnaki, which is the proper Sumerian term, not Anunnaki, as certain people would have us believe, that this didn't happen before the flood, it was afterwards. And this business of the Nephilim, meaning those who descended, I think referred to the Aryans who had come from, not long ago, before the flood, had arrived from Mars. Some of them survived the flood at Mount Hermon, which is on the border of the northern border of Israel and Syria and Lebanon. And that's where the River Jordan, or the Jordans, originates. And as the flood waters went down, according to the Sumerian texts, these survivors, they descended the mountain. That's where the term Nephilim, I believe, came from. And they created a village at a high, lofty plain. According to the Sumerian texts, it was called Eden, E-D-I-N. And the name of the village they created was called Karshag. And so the major lady there was Nin Karshag. Now she's referred to nowadays as Nin Hursag, and so she was the principal female there. And then after a period of time, they had a disaster. I think it was a fire, it would appear to be, and so they migrated to Sumeria. And because the Sumerians who survived the flood had forgotten their technology and the Aryans hadn't, then they became in effect, deified, because they taught the Sumerians how to plow. And Tazmikikau was the Phoenician name of the Lord of the Plow, and so he taught them how to plow. And then Tazmikikau, was actually another name was Mikau, and that's why later he was mentioned to be have wings and be Lord of the Air. And then a certain writer claims this was Lord of the Rocket Ships, which doesn't fit. Yes.
Where are they now? Where are they, Enlil and
Yeah.
Enki? Where are...
Oh, good question. The question is, where are they? I don't know whether they're still alive. Incidentally, I think we have to wrap it up now. I think it's time to it's nearly 10:30, and I didn't realize we were going on that long. Thank you all for coming, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you. Thank you.
I won't be here tomorrow, but I have to do this August or some other time. I hope you come back.
It would be dependent on if I was invited back.
I know you'll be invited back.
I'm not so sure. It's very unusual to be invited back for a second time in a row.
You know what? People hand in their papers and everybody thinks that you're supposed to be here.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And they do. I saw
we didn't bore
a
you.
lot of papers where number one listed. So, gosh. So, good luck. I'll continue to pray for you, sweetie. Thank you. Oh, that's okay.
Thank you for your courage.
Okay. I was going to ask you, why does Kennedy stay there in the White House? He's always voting for the Illuminati, the Bilderbergers, while all his family is being killed.
Thank you very much.
Paid off.
He's paid off.
Yeah, they have no respect for life in those families.
You were very good. I like this one. I like that one. The other one.
So he doesn't understand if he goes back with the books and so, I mean, it was a little bit, unless you get into the names, you know.
I had a problem trying to put it all together.
I understand this one.
This one, yeah, just a couple
I
of
understand this one.
Well, thank you for coming anyway.
Okay.
I really appreciate it.
Well, I want you to know I enjoyed you so much, try not to cry. You did an excellent job. Okay?
under the sea. Oh, yeah. Yes, unfortunately, they were wrong.
You had a glass too?
No, it's my second.
And because Engelhard realized that this thing went into full production all over the country, you wouldn't need catalytic converter in your cars. They used platinum.